The quirky, Earthbound-Inspired RPG about depression. If you've been anywhere on the internet over the past few years, you've probably come across these games at least once. I'm not gonna tackle how fucking smooth brains of a belief this is, and its respective followers. If you're interested in that, then may I suggest these videos. Oh, I don't want to play this game because it's just another Earthbound clone about depression and it's boring for That being said, there is merit to the idea. So it occurred to me that, hey, what if I play all these games and see which one I like the most? That's what this video is all about. It's not meant to be an all-encompassing list by any means. There are simply too many games for that. Get out of my head! Get out! But I think most people would agree that the games I'm covering are the big ones. Also, RPG's only club. So to all the Celeste fans out there, I'm sorry, I'm sure your game is wonderful, but it's not an RPG, so I do not care. These will be the games that I will be covering, and I'll be ranking them from worst to best. Important to note, I don't actually dislike any of these games, yes, even you, Y2K, and I think they're all pretty good. However, some are better than others. Despite what I've said, these games are all still independent of one another. Here's the SparkNotes version. But I will try my best nonetheless to rank them. I will also be ranking these games into tiers. If I say a game is F tier, that doesn't mean I think it's an F tier game, whatever that even means. Rather, in context to the other games on the list, I think it is F tier. What tiers should instead convey is that these games are of similar quality. Let me first clarify some things I am not going to do. I am not going to fully cover each game. Other videos have done that far better than I have, and this video is already long enough as is. I will talk at length about each game and its respective story, but this is not a collection of story analysis.
Undertale is a continuation of Toby's version of Earthbound, with Ness never being able to get home, adopting the name
Rather, it is a collection of reviews. Also, I do not care how good or bad a fandom is. I enjoy fanworks of all kinds, fan animation, fan theories, fan art, fan fiction. It's all good to me. Popular games are not popular without reason, so if anything, a bigger fandom's are just a plus for me. There are no specific criteria to which I'll be judging these games on, but I'll be analyzing gameplay, story, art, stuff like that. Not the fandom, okay? Of course, I understand that every one of these games, apart from Y2K,
they ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine,
has been branded as a masterpiece in their own right, and I wholeheartedly agree, and nah, fuck that, that's boring. As stated earlier, I like all these games, but it's important to be critical of them. If that offends you, then by all means be offended. I'd love to see discussion about this. One final thing to note about the games themselves, since this is a universal common point. These games are very story-oriented with mediocre-ish gameplay. I mean, it's an RPG, so what did you expect? So if you come for some Devil May Cry, fucking Metal Gear action level shit, you've come to the wrong video. Oh, and I will be spoiling each and every one of these games, obviously. I'll put warnings when they matter, but the bulk of the story of each of these games are in the spoilers, so that's just a heads up. Oh, and by the way, in the process of making this video, I didn't really record much of my gameplay, so I'll be crediting everyone in the end. This can be a very long video, so grab popcorn or something, and here we go.
Number 11.
Yeah, I don't think this placement shocked anyone. Not only is this game infamous for its poor quality, but has been the butt of all jokes. You may have noticed I refer to this game as Y2K and not Yiik.
And I'm being a gentleman by not using another word to describe you.
I am trying to be respectful, or at least I was, until this game's developers called this game Yiik.
And like talking to people in Yiik.
So fuck it, Yiik it is. Sorry I'm pronouncing it how you wanted me to. By the way, I know this game's developers have said some pretty scuffed up things in the past.
My mistake was thinking that video games are art. I wanted to make a game about a guy who's like a piece of shit, unlikable character who by the end of the game has to transform. Yeah. But too many gamers, when they look at this, when they play a game, they're so used to having to identify with the character that if they play a game where the main character is unlikable or has to do some bad stuff, they immediately get triggered by it. So the thing is, games aren't art. They're toys for children, and it's considered in bad form to talk about anything meaningful or impactful or thought-provoking.
Okay, that's enough of that. I'm not here to talk about this game's development history or aftermath. I just want to talk about the game itself. I'm sure some of you are foaming at the mouth at the mere mentioning of this game, but for those out of the loop, allow me to provide some context. Yiik, a postmodern RPG, is a game heavily inspired on elements from Earthbound, the Persona series, Paper Mario, and plenty others. Sounds good so far. What's more is that this game had some pretty high profile people working on it, and seemed to look pretty good from what was seen in the trailer. You know Toby Fox? The Undertale guy? Yeah, he worked on some of this game's soundtrack, and then deleted his promotional tweet because the game was that bad. Despite having nearly 20 hours of gameplay and voice acting,
It was May 22nd, 1996, when I met them.
the game really dropped the ball. So, what went wrong here? I'm sure many people would prefer for me not to talk about this game at all, given its reputation. However, like it or not, it exists, and it perfectly meets the criteria I'm looking for. What's more, I want to look at this game from an unbiased and fair point of view. In pursuit of this, I apologize if I paired some other reviews, but I'm not the first person to talk about this game. Before I go any further, I want to talk about the stuff I do think this game genuinely does well. Which is something to keep in mind, this is a pretty high effort game for what it's worth. It's not a cash grab or meant to be bad on purpose. First off, the visuals. This game has some amazing cinematography in some parts, and both the characters and environments stand out extremely well. Each area feels unique, and the art style reminds me a lot of the cartoony vibe that TF2 went with. Say what you want about this game, but although Yiik won't age well, its art style certainly will. Another point of praise comes by way of this game's music. It's not as good as some other games listed, but I did enjoy it. There are some really good tracks, especially towards the end of the game, which I do not care about spoiling, sorry.
Where's the piece of this puzzle? I'm begging, please. Where's the answer? The world needs the ball.
For those familiar with Sonic 06, this game's an adequate parallel. Bad story and bad gameplay, but its soundtrack is surprisingly good. Lastly, you may have noticed this game features voice acting.
All your days are belong to us.
And experience points to spend on character upgrades.
It's the only one on this list to do so. I think it's alright, not Oscar winning, but some parts are pretty good. It's very clear to me that they wanted to replicate the Persona series here. You know, minus the soul, personality, and actually being a good game. Although this game is very wordy, the voice acting makes it somewhat bearable to plow through. You may recognize Alex's voice actor, Kerbifer,
because I know she's trying not to think about it.
the creator of the Tome series, as well as Newground works back in the day.
You can have my big gay dad.
Among other things. And this is where things start to go south. Yes, we're only a few minutes in and I already have to talk bad about this game. The game begins with Alex Eggleston, our protagonist and resident sex-addicted douchebag. I do mean that, by the way. And this is where I immediately have problems with the game. When writing a story, it's important to immediately immerse your audience into the world. Take this example from Naruto.
12 years ago, a nine-tailed fox suddenly appeared. The ninja rose up to defend their villages. One shinobi faced the nine-tailed fox in mortal combat. This ninja was known as the Fourth Hokage.
Even after playing this game for its first hour, what do I really know about Alex and his world? It's in the 90s, he's a liberal arts major, he has no soul.
Hey, careful with that word, that is our word.
I really have no clue how to feel about this, and Alex is not interesting enough for me to care about him right away, but more on that in a bit. This game's whole opening sequence should have been rewritten, and while you're at it, rewrite the rest of the story as well. It really needs to slow the fuck down and properly introduce these characters. Usually RPGs will give you the time to talk to NPCs and explore the world, and while you can do that in Yiik, there's no incentive to do so and the game lacks any charm to it. This game's plot somewhat, and I do mean somewhat, it kinda spirals everywhere, revolves around the disappearance around Sanri Park, which is from this point on we join with friends both old and new where weird stuff happens like involving souls and shit. And oh my god, this game cannot manage tone for the life of it. Especially in the early game, this game tries to act really creepy with all this soul-snatching shenanigans. It does this by playing creepy music with colorful backgrounds. Or, my personal favorite, screaming into my face about it.
What the hell was that? What the hell is going on?
This game's writing is a mess. It feels like I'm on an archive of her own, and this game doesn't know whether it wants to be a video game or a goddamn book. Half of this game's writing is exposition, and I am no way exaggerating in any shape or form when I say that. Now look, exposition is sometimes necessary, especially when something cannot be immediately explained from observation alone.
Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
However, if you rely on it too much, it can ruin the pacing of a scene. Why does this game feel the need to explain so much? This game's story is very convoluted, unnecessarily so. It involves parallel universes and lives, and while that's a novel idea worth exploring, Yiik spends most of its time explaining it through word crawls rather than actually showing me it. It feels like I'm reading a summary of the story rather than experiencing it for myself. This brings up a principle that I will refer to throughout this video: show, don't tell. In short, if your audience cannot reliably follow the story without being told in front of them like a fucking elementary school class, your story will suck. And Yiik's story sucks. The problem is not that Yiik has too much dialogue, but rather it uses it poorly. Every time something interesting happens on screen and I start to ask myself questions, I am immediately told the answer. This is my favorite example of this, and this is how I reacted to when playing.
We are inside a room. We can tell from the decorations on the wall.
But it gets even worse than that. This isn't an isolated incident either. The worst comes when Alex's house is possessed by this thing, an entity. They're like soul ghosts and stuff. It's really creepy until it suddenly isn't anymore.
I don't know if you've noticed, you see, there was a figure in my house.
It honestly astonishes me how much of this game can be improved simply by cutting the amount of monologues. And for fuck's sake, the developers even realized this. They updated the game to do this and even said recommended.
Certified hook.
I didn't choose this option because you expect me not to choose the funny mode? Yeah, you heard me right. They update this game's story. In an RPG. However, there's an even better example of this. Early into the game we meet Rory, a character whose arc revolves around the mysterious disappearance of his sister. And here Rory has to confront an entity to face what he perceives as his sister.
That's my sister! That's Carrie!
But fuck that! Instead of confronting his demons, we get a goofy golden alpaca fight that ruins the entire tone. In the current version of the game, they made the golden alpaca into this cool warrior-like figure. And although the visuals are admittedly really impressive here, I still have no clue as to what the fuck this is supposed to be, even after completing the game. And look, if your story is so bad that you have to patch it, that's when you know you have fucked up. Plot lines are constantly brought up and add nothing of significance other than to add padding to this game's story. Take this scene for example. This is after a long ass quest to find a record for some reason, and now I have to listen to this shit?
I do my best to explain the circumstances by which I came to possess this rare leaf. In my youth, a very good man. I was something.
What does this add to the game's story? Fucking nothing. And just before you thought the characters might be good, no, they suck as well. The only characters that get any sort of attention are Alex, Villa, and Essentia. The rest get sidelined. Rory, Claudio, and Chandra all face the loss of a sibling, yet their characters never grow beyond this, and are basically the same character right up to the end of the game. And then there's Michael, who does nothing but jack off in the fucking corner. What results from this is a very uncharismatic main cast of characters. It isn't until the very end do these characters really function as a group. Up until that point, we kinda only really tag along with Alex's quest for plot reasons, yet I'm supposed to take them seriously.
Yes, I am down, let's do this!
And even then, most of our time with him is for explaining this game's lore. In the end of the game, we are permanently killed off. Now, killing a character or concept in the series is always a tricky thing. Do it right, and you'll propel your story in a new direction. Fuck it up, and you'll waste potential. And Yiik falls into the latter category. The most interesting thing that can happen in this game is that unless you're a pussy and choose to switch it off, Rory can actually commit suicide in this game. The problem is that this scene falls flat since there's no reason to really care about Rory, and Alex just fucking monologues again. However, I like the concept that Alex's choices actually have consequences, which is a theme the game desperately tries to push. Also, Bella's voice acting here is 10 out of 10, Jesus Christ.
None of that matters anymore, Alex! Rory is dead!
You're probably familiar with this scene.
Hey, dude, cool it with that! No one cares about your sister right now! We almost just died ourselves!
Which they really took to heart.
No one cares about your sister right now. We almost just died ourselves.
Alex is portrayed as this really flawed character who must overcome his material desires and his selfishness. But this one really gets explored towards the end of the game. At no point in the story did I feel like Alex was unjustified for acting how he did. Same goes with everyone else in the story really. For a protagonist, Alex is just underwhelming and generic. And if your story isn't interesting, it isn't a good story. But hey, at least the gameplay is good and shit.
Fucking thing sucks!
Actually, had the story been all, I wouldn't mind too much. But the gameplay is downright atrocious. And this is the reason why only 11% of the people who own the game have actually completed it. The dungeons are alright. They're not really innovative in any sense, but I never felt like they dragged out for too long. The combat though, it's slow. Embarrassingly so.
kill myself. Sometimes I wake up, wanna kill myself. How would you feel if I killed myself? I look in the mirror and wanna shoot myself.
All the opponents you face have a ridiculous amount of HP for no reason, and every input, be it dodging or attacking, requires a minigame to do. Not only are these minigames slow, but some are just complete bullshit. They could have really benefited from something like Mario and Luigi where they offer you a place to practice and get familiar with the minigames. But Yiik just drops you in and expects you to kill the Viet Cong. The funny thing is, there aren't even that many random encounters in Yiik, but you'll still find yourself spending your time and wasting away in these repetitive and mundane battles. This is another weak point for the plot too. The enemies I face should tell me about the world that I'm in and really immerse myself in whatever mission I'm undertaking. Yet all the enemies throughout the game are generic and make no sense contextually. In games like Earthbound, the whole world is goofy, so it makes sense. But Yiik takes place in this 90s setting, so what is it that I'm fighting exactly? Healing items are percentage based, so if this game lacks any sense of difficulty when you can stock up on early game items, since the game gives you an insane amount of money for chests. This all got so bad that towards the end of the game I switched to an easier difficulty since I couldn't stand spending 20 minutes in fights anymore. It's really strange too, since I actually enjoyed the story's pacing for the most part, even if it lacked any sense of direction. But the gameplay just turned everything into a slog. Credit where credit is due though, some of the puzzles this game incorporates are pretty unique and innovative. Unpolished is the word I use to describe Yiik. Sloppy running, terrible combat, weird visual bugs, game-breaking bugs, unexplainable glitches, improper usage of tone, and so much more. The worst is when I change my controls and the game doesn't update its visuals, which made me wonder why I was failing these minigames and I didn't know why. The irony here is that there are things about Yiik's story that I do like. A big focus of it is parallel lives and consequence, as stated earlier. It's as if the writer suddenly had an aneurysm towards the end, because it suddenly becomes 10 times better. Before the final boss of the game, you are given a little over 30 days to prepare, and you can choose to level up, explore the world, or interact with your friends. It's here that the group actually begins to develop a little and actually care about these guys more. And I really do enjoy the fact that the game's encouraging you to explore. Like all things in Yiik though, it's half-baked at best, and the game gives you too much time for what amounts to glorified grinding, not to mention if group dialogue just stops after a certain point for some reason. Alex will also begin to notice that things aren't what they seem, and instead of force-feeding it to you, the game actually takes the time to show the player this. Yiik's ending becomes super bizarre real fast, and in a good way too.
Dad?
That's my name, unless you can think of a better one.
Where's Mom?
That never gets old.
I wish the entire game was like this. Make it some sort of crazy mystery game. I was impressed on how much the game questioned what I thought these characters truly were, and I was invested in it too. Even the world will suddenly change, and I like how it presents Alex as the only one who's conscious of what's going on, whereas all his friends are completely out of it. The end of this game tries to make you feel powerless against this daunting opponent you don't truly understand and one that threatens the entire world. And while it succeeds in this aspect, it's still underwhelming and not explored as much as it could be. Like, this is supposed to be the final boss? This weird comet thing? Actually no, it's these two fuckers right here, and they don't get any sort of explanation, they're just kinda there. The point is, there is gold in Yiik's story, but unfortunately it's buried beneath a pile of dog shit. By this point in the game though, it's too late, and Alex's act of self-improvement feels incredibly rushed. The stupid asshole at the end doesn't help either. Yiik so desperately wants to be taken seriously, but it lacks any clear sense of focus on the story it wants to be. It's a game about self-awareness that lacks any self-awareness itself. I'm sure I heard someone else say that about this game first, but I can't remember exactly where. Yiik is a bad game, but it's not terrible. People like to speak of this game like it's the spawn of Satan, but it's really not. There's far worse out there, and Yiik was at least worthwhile enough for me to continue playing it until the end. I feel like if they were to remake Yiik, rework the gameplay and rewrite its script, you'd actually end up with an interesting and fun game, one that would rank towards the higher end of this list. I honestly hope so, because I like the ideas Yiik brings to the table. It's a good game that is terribly made. It's the only game here that I can't recommend, sorry. I did try to go into this game liking it, but it is very flawed to say the least.
Hey, dude, cool it with that! No one cares about your sister!
It's an incoherent mess of a story that explains so much yet accomplishes so little. Gameplay that makes you want to commit seppuku, and overall a very forgettable experience. To no one's surprise, Yiik is in last place. It's not a very good game, but it's truly one of a kind.
Number 10.
This is a game I feel like very few people have actually played, but probably seen at least once during their time on the internet. In this game, there is no story. There is no plot. There are no battles, there are no characters, there are no puzzles.
And there is no Queen of England.
The game demands nothing of you but to walk around. Where can you go? Anywhere. Yume Nikki means Dream Diary. Released in 2004 for free, the game has you play as this young shunning girl named Marotsuki, who makes this really cute sound when she walks. Just listen to it. There's nothing to do other than explore her dreams at your own pace. Your only objective is to collect all 24 effects scattered across the dream world, and win the game. Because walking around is the only thing you do in this game, it definitely doesn't constitute as an RPG, although it is made in RPG Maker. Yume Nikki has been updated many times since its initial release, and I will be looking at the current version, specifically the one ported to Steam. Well, unless you're this guy. Despite being a solo developer RPG Maker game, this game is big. There's a lot to explore here. Because exploration is the only thing you do, Yume Nikki's exploration comes across as incredibly natural and self-rewarding. The game does not reward you for discovering a new area, there's no uncompleted map or new item, rather you find reward by virtue of satisfaction alone. I can't exactly praise Yume Nikki in terms of gameplay or story for obvious reasons.
It's nothing!
However, I do enjoy its visuals. Helped by its soundtrack, Yume Nikki is an incredibly atmospheric game, arguably the most in this entire list. It's incredibly easy to get lost here, and for whatever reason this game pulls a lot from Aztec imagery. Ooh. It's hard to exactly talk about this game since it relies entirely on one's experience with it, due to the lack of a story. The reason why I'm talking about this game in the first place is because other games here draw inspiration from it, as well as Yume Nikki itself having references to Earthbound. Yume Nikki is not a horror game, although it may look that way on the onset. A big appeal of this game is its creepier aspects though, and I enjoy these parts of the game the most. Because the game does not tell you where to go, and by virtue of the sheer scope of it all, this game can take a while to complete. It took me a little under 7 hours to complete. However, I used a guide whenever I got bored. If you're less than patient than I am, you can go for a lot longer. A lot of people may write this game off as boring, and while I couldn't disagree more, I do think it's worth looking into, given that I am supposed to be judging this game.
If it's not fun, why bother?
Apart from increasing this game's movement speed, which is abysmally slow at first, think of it this way. Your friend at school has introduced you to this niche and creepy Japanese game called Yume Nikki. You boot it up on your crappy notebook and explore the world, and are amazed about how much there is to uncover. You go back to school and talk to your friend about things he has never explored before in this game. And he tells you the exact same thing, and you're not even sure if everything he's saying is even real. That is the kind of game Yume Nikki is. This game has a wide variety of locations, some of which are very hard to access. This game places you in a hub world where you can enter different worlds via doors, and these doors have different sub-levels. Take a White Desert B. In order to get to this area, you first have to take the door to the graffiti world, then enter the mall, then enter the dense woods area, then the teleport maze, the wilderness, the FC world, the FC dungeon, and finally, you're here. That is the kind of depth Yume Nikki offers. And let me remind you that the game does not tell you where to go, so this is something you're going to have to discover by simply exploring by yourself. Or, alternatively, you could just look at the fucking wiki. This game also has many random events, the most famous one being the Oboa event. And this is what I knew the game for. Flip on and off the switch an annoying number of times till it happens. Oh, how cute.
You so fucking precious when you smile.
I already mentioned this game's atmospheric, but to get some insight on what I really mean by this, every area is incredibly distinct. Not only does each area have a unique song, but they are all visually very different from one another. It's easy to get lost in this game, but it's just as easy to know if you've done something before. Some areas there's nothing to do apart from enjoy the scenery, as is the case of Sky Garden. There's Hell, which serves as this long maze connecting to other areas complete with droning music. The Pink Sea, which is desolate. The FC World, which changes the entirety of this game's graphics and menu. And my personal favorite, Mars. By sleeping on the Martian spaceship, you might crash land into Mars, where you can meet this lonely fella. For those who don't understand what I'm getting at here, Yume Nikki, which has you explore dreams,
Wake up, Lieutenant!
aims at making you feel exactly that way, completely immersed in its world, and it does a fantastic job at it. Yume Nikki's soundtrack especially helps in this regard. Each song is distinct and fits each area to a T. There's just one problem I have though. Listen to this song. Congratulations! You have just listened to the entire Yume Nikki soundtrack! Given that a soundtrack's purpose is, above all else, to benefit its game, I won't scrutinize it all that much. But come on, I wish this game had one song that wasn't just 5 notes repeating. I at least hope for the credits song to be like that, but nope. It sounds like a song that never starts. Other games employ songs like Yume Nikki, but they have longer songs in addition to that. With Yume Nikki though, this is fucking it. That's all you're getting. It does its job well, but it can do more. I can't really say Yume Nikki's soundtrack is better than other games here because each song is only like 10 seconds long. But in all fairness, Yume Nikki is not trying to tell a complex story featuring a full and diverse soundtrack. And on that story, well, there is none. It's all interpretable, and there are plenty of theories you can look up online. Can I praise Yume Nikki for its writing? Oh no, it doesn't have any to speak of. Wow, this girl here symbolizes Manotsuki's hatred of women. You could even argue that this game doesn't have any meaning at all, and it's just random shit for the sake of random shit. That could be true, but think of it this way. Yume Nikki's creator, Kikiyama, who could be living in a cave for all we know that little about him, put all this stuff in the game for a reason. Even if he did it not to make any sense, he added it at the very least because it was interesting to him. Even if he flat out said Yume Nikki does not have any meaning to draw from, it's still fun to theorize about these things. That's what makes this game so fun. You get to explore and try to piece together a puzzle based on your own experience, even if there is no puzzle to solve. Yume Nikki does have an ending though, and it absolutely is interpretable. It's pretty short, so if you don't want to see it, skip here. After your arduous journey is over and you collect all the effects, you'll notice this sitting on your balcony.
Kill yourself now!
Yeah, that's how it ends. Stuff like this, Manotsuki refusing to leave, and other crazy shit that can happen in the game, does convince me that Kikiyama, at the very least, is trying to convey something, even if it isn't much. Speculation is always fun though. Regardless of whether you enjoy this game or not though, there's no denying its influence. In addition to being a direct inspiration for other games here, it has also spawned a fan-driven sequel, which is even bigger by the way, a 3D game, a manga, and much more. I can't rank this game any higher, it's just a glorified walking sim. One with a good heart and aesthetic, yes, but seriously that's what the game is, admit it. I do have to unironically explain why the game is above Yiik though. Yiik may have significantly more content than Yume Nikki, a story to tell, a game to play, and music to listen to, but the difference is Yiik is incompetent, Yume Nikki knows what it's doing. Yiik can be blatantly unfun to scarf down due to its terrible gameplay and poorly written story. Yume Nikki by contrast is just simple by design. It's not asking for much, but it's good at what it does. From the perspective of being a game, it does a far better job than Yiik. More isn't always better. You should check out this game. It screams something you can do whenever you're feeling bored. It's a game that you can take at your own pace, and I respect it for what it does. And if you're interested for more, then feel free to play its many fan games. Unsurprisingly though, this is probably the least amount of time I will spend on a game here. There's simply not much that I can talk about. Nonetheless, Yume Nikki does a good job of what it sets out to do. This game is number 10 on the list.
Number 9.
Oneshot is an RPG Maker game released in 2014. It's a rather simple game fixated around a central mechanic. As the name implies, you only have one shot. If you close the game at any time, the main character dies and that's it. Once you beat the game, you can never replay it. However, I'm not here to talk about the original Oneshot, but rather the 2016 remaster that's on Steam, because it is better. In Oneshot, you play as, or more accurately, guide the protagonist Nico. Nico is this cat child thing in... Okay, let's get this out of the way first. Okay, so when I first played Oneshot, I thought Nico was a girl. However, upon watching other people play this game, they refer to Nico as a he.
Cowboys in the showers at Ram.
Turns out Nico's gender has never been specified. Since this is a sensitive topic, I will be completely neutral about it. I'm also going to extend this to Undertale and Deltarune characters as well. So, can we all shut the fuck up now?
Nobody gives a shit what you want!
Okay, good. Nico does not belong into the world we are exploring, and the reason why Nico is in a different world is never really the focus of the game. Rather, the player must guide Nico to return this world's sun, which takes the form of a light bulb, to a giant tower in the center of the world. Oneshot resembles Yume Nikki in the sense that there is no actual RPG mechanics, rather all you do is walk. However, Oneshot introduces some revolutionary new mechanics such as solving puzzles and talking to NPCs. Because of this, like Yume Nikki, Oneshot relies heavily on its atmosphere and world building, both of which it does very well. This game is absolutely gorgeous and uses color and lighting to a beautiful effect. Each area has a distinct color palette and really immerses yourself into its world. Despite Oneshot's story being relatively simple all things considered, everything feels believable. Speaking of the areas, they are 3 in total: the Barrens, the Glen, and the Refuge. You'll be greeted by a brief cinematic before entering each area. The areas are all quite short, however One-Shot punches far above its weight by again, its atmosphere. I really cannot stress that enough. This immersion is greatly helped by this game's soundtrack. From this point on, I'll be judging the game's soundtrack both in and out of context. Out of context, I mean how good would a soundtrack be to listen to as a standalone album. And in context, how well does it enhance the overall experience? The latter is far more important, as that's the whole point of a soundtrack. A good soundtrack will make or break a piece of media, and One-Shot certainly makes it. And oh my god, Nico's adorable. I can see why people like this game so much.
Listen, Fortnite. Yeah, your game is super trash.
Finally, something cute that Japanese haven't touched? Wait, never mind. Actually, I do want to talk about Nico for a moment here. Like many protagonists on this list, they do speak. Unlike Yiik though, Nico doesn't need to go full Shakespeare mode to convey what they are thinking. The game makes it very clear that Nico just wants to return home and is in a world we don't truly understand, even if they do want to save it. Nico will also sometimes ask to take a nap, which will close the game.
So pissed off.
Upon booting it back up, you'll be greeted by these really cute cutscenes. There's no dialogue in them, but it really goes to demonstrate Nico's desire to be back home again. Again, show don't tell. As you travel through the world, some characters will tell you about the world before the sun disappeared, and that returning the sun may not actually save the world. This is compounded with these black squares of death you see everywhere, which corrupt the world. What this does is create a sense of urgency on what you are doing. One-Shot's world is overall very well crafted, and each character interaction serves a purpose. Nothing wastes your time. The characters you encounter serve a minor role, however they all have their own desires for the sun to return. I also really enjoy the fact that as you get closer and closer to the tower, it becomes more uncertain as to whether returning the sun or not will make a difference. Speaking of the characters, I love their designs. Not only are they all really cute, but they are all very easily distinguishable from one another. They all pop out super well due to intelligent use of color and shapes. This is all more impressive when you consider the fact that, despite serving a minor role, these characters are all easy to remember after playing the game. I haven't even begun to talk about this game's 4th wall breaks. Other games do this as well, but One-Shot takes this meta-ness to a whole new level. Nico will actively converse with the player, leading to cute interactions like this. In other words, you are a character in this story. And it's at this point I should mention that this game has some surprising levels of permission on your computer. You'll encounter this computer who, apart from jump scaring you for seizing you at the beginning, will ask you to retrieve information from your PC. The game will generate text files and fucking change your desktop wallpaper, which I couldn't see because I had a wallpaper engine, but whatever. These all serve to function as puzzles, and while I do enjoy the meta story, these puzzles are really gimmicky and come across as incredibly forced. Ooh, I have to shake my screen. Ooh, what innovative gameplay. One-Shot's regular puzzles though are another story. Unlike other games which force you into solving a puzzle to get across a certain obstacle, One-Shot's puzzles are more gradual and feel more like an actual problem to solve. Every game on this list has what I like to call the downtime problem. Basically, you need to strike a balance between gameplay and conducting your story, and very often there will be brief bits of story interrupted by lots of downtime where you do nothing apart from plow through a dungeon. One-Shot cheats in this aspect because it doesn't have battles, but I find the puzzles to enhance the overall experience rather than detract from it. Here's an example. In order to reach the Glen, the game's second area, you need to repair this robot. As you explore the map, you read these papers about a cleaning product and how to assemble it. Putting 2 and 2 together, you also find items and parts of the map that meet this description. Since the game allows you to combine items, this puzzle takes a while to complete, but I hope you see what I mean when I say this puzzle feels natural. It's not a combination code, it's something you actually have to figure it out and come up with ideas to solve. And like every good puzzle, it has the aha moment. There are other puzzles exactly like this, and I wish more RPG games did this sort of puzzle instead of fucking shape recognition.
Arch. You guessed it.
Arch.
It goes in the square hole.
Please play One-Shot. It's only $10. I'm going to talk about the game's endings now, so skip here if you don't want to be spoiled. I'll talk about this game's good ending first. This came about in the Solstice update, and wow, what a job it does. Upon repeating the game, you were able to access part of the map you weren't able to before, and this causes the world machine to become Decado Avocado incarnate. There were some questions left about by the first ending, most notably what the world machine was. It's the computer that speaks to the player directly and is the spirit of the world. However, its exact motives and origins aren't exactly clear, and nor does it explain why the world is gradually becoming corrupted. One-Shot's Solstice ending elaborates on these questions. Not only are there some really cool characters, but the entire game is different. I'm glad we didn't rehash the game with extra content. The Solstice route is completely different than the original, and really serves as a breath of fresh air. This doubles this game's playtime, which was desperately needed for such a short game. I can't say the Solstice route is better than the original though. Although I like the new characters, they ditched Nico fairly quickly. The Fox is the worst example of this. They're given a basic introduction and I'm supposed to trust them in any meaningful sense. I like the concept, yes, but One-Shot's previous characters worked because they weren't relevant to the overall story. These new characters though are relevant, and given that the game is still super short, their characters feel rushed as well. There are some interesting aspects about them, but it's never fully explored. Take Cedric for example. He's supposed to be the author's son, a previously established character of great importance, yet nothing really substantial comes about this. He just fucking flies away. Then you have to do some Doki Doki Literature Club crap with the game files, and I honestly just don't care. During the entire route, the plaid shirts are closing in, and it's supposed to be in a tight panic. And I felt that way too, until our saviors magically appear towards the end. I wish the game actually did some risk to get them back, like have the player try to save them, and you can apparently fuck up if you fail. That would put the game's meta-narrative and one-shot mechanic to great use in my opinion. The whole Solstice ending comes off as, oh, these guys are important, aren't they so meta and cool? Again, I like them, but I feel like it was a bit of a letdown. The Solstice ending just isn't it for me, even if I do find it to be well written. The parts I do like are related to Nico, most notably when Nico lashes out at the player for seemingly toying with them. I thought that was really well done.
You shut the fuck up! You shut the fuck up! You shut the fuck!
So let's instead talk about the ending that will occur on one's first playthrough. As mentioned previously, you were constantly reminded that returning the sun may not save the world. However, this has been your mission since the very beginning. You have to see it until the end. After the world machine throws a hissy fit and an annoying labyrinth puzzle, you finally reach the top of the tower. Poetically, it's a place where you started the game, a small, dark room. It's here where the bombshell is dropped. You can save a world, or you can save Nico, but not both. To be honest, up until this point, while I had been enjoying One-Shot, I didn't think it was anything special, and definitely not worth $10. This is what made it for me. I took several minutes processing this decision, since I didn't know what to do. There's no right or wrong answer here, it's just a matter of moral principle. We have spent such a long time with Nico that it's natural to just want the best for them, but at the same time we have also explored the world and know that we are the only one who can save it. This is what I love in video games, and it's the reason why it's such a unique storytelling medium compared to film. You actively choose what you want to do, and it's great. I love when games do stuff like this. I know people prefer happy endings, and trust me, I like a well-deserved happily ever after as much as the next guy, but I also like some sad shit. This is straight up my alley. Should you choose to save the world, at long last you'll get to see a dark world illuminated by light. But Nico is nowhere to be seen. If you instead choose to save Nico, you finally watch him get to reunite with her mother, but the world will go dark for good and everybody's dead. What an ending. So if I'm praising One-Shot this much, why don't I have it any higher? Past this point all the games are good, and One-Shot is no exception. Yes, One-Shot's story is good, but the games above do the same, and go further beyond with their narrative and characters.
Welcome to the Cum Zone.
Yes, One-Shot's visuals are appealing, but it is not unique in this aspect. Yes, One-Shot's puzzles are fantastic, but these games have proper combat systems, some of which are extremely fun and well designed. Yes, One-Shot's music is atmospheric, but other games do this as well and more. I cannot reasonably put One-Shot any higher unfortunately. It's a great game, do play it, but it's also the shortest game on this list, at around 3 to 4 hours for a single playthrough. For now, One-Shot is staying comfortably at number 9.
Number 8.
Off is a Belgian, i.e. French, RPG maker game in 2008. I don't even know where to start with this game. It's by far the most unique out of any game here. This game has character, there's nothing else quite like it. In Off, you play as the scout from TF2, the Batter. The Batter acts as the player's vessel. Keep that in mind as yes, the player is part of the story here as well, albeit not to the same extent as in Oneshot. You soon meet this creepy looking cat, the Judge.
Le juge.
The Judge instructs you how to play the game and gives you some brief info about this world. There are 4 zones, each with a guardian. The Batter also lays out his intention here as well, a holy mission to purify the world. Sounds vague? Good, it's supposed to be unclear, more about later. From here on, the game begins. And if you've noticed, there's tons of baseball references in this game. Now my first impression of this game was, wow, this game is ugly. But it becomes very apparent that this is merely Off's art direction and is intentional. The overworld looks bland, however color is more of a focus. Each zone has a different color, whereas the characters are distinctly black and white only. Speaking of designs, this game is creepy. I started playing this game at 1 AM and I did not have a good time because of that. While the overworld is simplistic, the character sprites are very detailed and come across as quite eerie. The game even warns you from the beginning that not everybody might find this a comforting experience. Off's music is phenomenal. It isn't afraid to experiment around, and as a result, you're going to get a wide selection of tracks. A lot of the songs are very droning and give off a sense of loneliness, which is going to be a recurring theme. It kind of reminds me of Portal in that way. I'll refer to Off's soundtrack a few more times as I go on, but good god, Off's battle music is such a banger.
Yo!
Off relies a lot on its world building. Apart from generally being atmospheric, the world in Off is intentionally bizarre. One example being the elements. It's not water, earth, fire, air. No, it's smoke, metal, plastic, meat, and the secret 5th element, sugar. Each zone is kind of its own unique world. Zone 1 is farming and mining, Zone 2 has a library and a theme park, and Zone 3 is a huge factory. This isn't even to mention the final area of the game. This is also the first game where we really start to have some proper characters. The Judge is the first companion we meet, and he guides us through our journey. He speaks in a super verbose tongue that can be difficult to understand at times.
Open widely your ears and listen well. Listen with both ears, bitch. For I will not say this twice. Not even amidst the most pathetic pleas.
The next recurring character is Zachary, a fan favorite. He acts as a shopkeeper and brief mentor, as well as repeatedly breaking the fourth wall. To be honest though, I don't understand why people like him so much. I've kinda grown numb to the "ooh, we're in a video game" nonsense games do now. Then we have the guardians of each zone, which unsurprisingly act as bosses. They're all presented as selfish and cruel in some fashion. My favorite is Didon though, just because he's such an asshole.
Get the fuck out of my way this instant if you want to keep your position.
I should give attention to Enoch as well. The setting completely changes when you enter his room. I love stuff like that. Lastly, we have the Batter himself, who is also not a silent protagonist. He speaks very rarely and to the point at that. The Batter is a prime example of how you don't need a complex main character in order for them to be interesting. The Batter is just badass. He commands a presence that isn't matched elsewhere in Off. Prepare yourselves to suffer my judgment. As you progress through the game, it becomes clear that purifying the world, or whatever it is that you are doing, is not what you might have initially thought it to be. Upon defeating the boss of any given zone, the zone will become purified. Should you choose to return to a purified zone, you will be greeted with this. What the fuck? I can't imagine playing this game with headphones, just listen to this. Unlike the colorful zones we are used to, it's completely whitewashed now. In addition to the world map and some other areas, this is as creepy as the game gets, and I absolutely love it. There's no dialogue or NPCs in these areas, it's just you and whatever these guys are. Love for everyone, huh? These are the secretaries, the only enemies you encounter in purified zones, and they look like dolls from hell. Off is not a horror game per se, but if you're interested in making one, please take note of what this game does. And the best part is, these segments are entirely optional. This is where the game really begins to create depth for itself, as you question what you're actually doing is right. Off's story as a whole is quite cryptic in nature. I'll talk more about that when discussing this game's ending, but Off's story is told through bits and pieces that you have to discover for yourself. The artwork especially contributes to this. It's kinda hard to describe. But this is where the praise ends for me. It's not all sunshine and rainbows for Off. My first point of criticism is that it's French. I like what this game sets out to do, but there are some glaring issues I have. First, the combat, and considering this is our first proper RPG that isn't Yiik, this is a big point of contention that I have. Off's combat isn't necessarily turn-based, it depends on the meter. I know other games do this as well, but I can't fucking stand it. I like RPG combat since I get to strategize and decide in what order I should do moves in. What's the rush? The game tries to add depth to its combat by adding elemental effects to certain moves, but you'll never have to use these. This game also has status effects, but the only one worth using is poison, as it essentially ensures you'll win every fight. The game is easy, insultingly easy. All you have to do is spam poison and your most damaging attack, and maybe, just maybe, use a healing item. I appreciated the fights more for the story than the actual gameplay. It simply isn't engaging. It's not as bad as Yiik's since Off's fights aren't as long, but it does add up when you're doing the same brainless inputs. The only enemies in this game that can remotely threaten you are the aforementioned secretaries. Wow, what a great game over song. If only I actually heard it. There are also some problems I have with Off's menu tomfuckery as well. Take a look at it. Object, competence, active. This disoriented me when I first played the game. Object should have been replaced with inventory, and competence with skills, since that's what all RPGs do. As for active, I didn't know what that button did until the end of the game. Turns out it makes the combat even less turn-based, which, yeah, no thanks. Although I understand that's a personal preference thing. This is not to suggest Off's gameplay is all bad. There's quite a lot to like about it. For one thing, Off does a good job at managing its economy. Most other games here will take the liberty of giving you way too much money and allowing you to buy whatever you want from shops. Off strikes a perfect balance of giving you just enough money to buy some things, but not everything. The unfortunate reality is that the game is so easy that this doesn't really matter, but I do enjoy that Off at least made it work. Off is also very heavy on its puzzles. Some are just basic combination puzzles which makes me drive my head into a wall, but however some are pretty clever. This one, which requires you to decipher a calendar and take a quiz, is pretty challenging, but also well designed. There's also a part of this game where you're given a certain time limit to kill enemies, and it's only during this time limit can you access certain items. Giving that sense of pressure is always really nice. It's not Outer Wilds level pressure, but it's still pretty good. If you made it this far and are interested in playing, then give it a go. It's free and has been accurately translated to English 3 times over by now. It's also not too long of a game, but I will be entering spoiler territory now. One of my favorite things that happens in this game is that after you defeat the Guardian of Zone 2, Japhet. Japhet has been possessing the body of the judge's brother, ultimately killing him. Upon returning to the now purified zone, you can see the judge mourning and crying for his brother to return. I didn't expect this at all from Off, and really made me appreciate the attention to detail that this game has. So we come to this game's finale. Throughout the game we briefly see this kid, and we are not met by a text wall. Thanks Yiik. Here we enter the room. It recalls the life of this kid, who is named Hugo, and specifically the relationship with his parents and the other guardians. Not only is this part of the game completely different in a storytelling sense, but it is also from a visual sense as well. The world is now extremely detailed, and we get a much different picture of the guardians. Unlike the cruel and uncaring characters that we are used to, they seem to be kind and optimistic to a new future. I absolutely adore the presentation and music in this section of the game. It really feels askew and speaks of Off's smart use of art direction. There's even this neat little segment where we play as a comic book character and have to fight the evil Ball Man. I filled Ballville with clones of my evil self. There's no way to stop us now, Boxer. And I've also kidnapped your little girlfriend. The chapters are told in reverse order, which is really neat, and we finally fight the Queen, who has been mentioned time and time again throughout the game. While the fight is easy, I really enjoy the scolding words she says. It really goes a long way of adding proof to the fact that there's more nuance to the plot than I had initially believed. Are you winning, son? After committing infanticide, the world begins to crumble as we approach the end. It's here where the judge stops us and scolds us on what the fuck we have been doing. You know, killing everyone seems to be a common theme among these games. Is this fucking Columbine? Unlike Undertale, which robs you of his choice at the end, Off gives you one last chance at redemption. You can choose to stay loyal to the batter, or realize your sins and face him down. If you fight the judge, he goes down fairly quickly, he's just a cat. The batter turns off the world, hence the name, Off. Siding against the batter grants us this really epic finale with appropriate music. Too bad it's still super easy. Interestingly though, should you fail this fight, the batter will resume his mission and turn off the world anyway. What comes next is the judge walks around the desolate world as Over the Rainbow plays. It's a grim reminder of what has happened. It's too late, everything is lost. I know, but I prefer this over your victory. Upon further review, I am content with Off's ending, but upon completing the game, my initial reaction was this.
That's it?
Don't get me wrong, I enjoy Off's story for what it's worth, but for as interesting as the ending was, I really wish more had been done with it. I wanted to know more about the batter, the queen, and especially Hugo, but the game only scratches the surface of this. I do feel like had Off been longer, I would have enjoyed the story far more, as it would have been developed far more thoroughly. Again, not to suggest Off's story is underdeveloped per se, but it has the potential to be so much more. I don't really know how to feel about this game, it's so unlike anything else I've played. I can't reasonably rank it any higher though, for the exact same reasons I mentioned with Oneshot. It's short, and now I'm not saying longer equals better, but I do think Off could have benefited a lot from being a tad bit more thorough, especially since the world building is so good. Add on to that the numerous issues I have with this game's lackluster combat system, and I'm choosing to put this game here. I do recommend this game, it's not trying to be a grandiose story in all fairness, but it simply did not have the same impact on me as the games above it. I think Off's biggest strength is its presentation. So, without further ado, Off is ranked at number 8.
Number 7.
Time for the most obscure game on this list, Everhood, an ineffable tale about the inexpressible divine moments of truth. I debated whether to include this game on the list at all, given how few people know about it. However, I had already played this game long before I decided to make this video, and given that it perfectly matched the criteria I'm looking for, fuck it, why not? Everhood's obscurity really is a shame though, and I hope it sprinkles some attention to it. It's also the newest game here, released just last year in 2021. Really, if you want a proper introduction to this game, just watch Critical's playthrough and review. In Everhood, you enter the realm of immortals, playing as Red, a wooden doll who resembles a Geno from Super Mario RPG. Your right arm is missing, and your only initial objective is to reclaim it. On your way, you explore a truly bizarre world and colorful characters. Discovering the truth behind the nature of its reality is something you will also explore as you go forward. This game is very strange, and not just in the Earthbound sense. It leans heavily into the abstract, and even after completing the game, it's tough to comprehend what I had just played. Unlike many other games here, which were made in RPG Maker, Everhood was made in the Unity engine, which allows it to explore far more in-depth visuals. Warning now, if you have epilepsy, skip here, go no further. This game feels like an acid trip, which isn't too surprising since there's a scene which practically acts as such. The visuals are interesting to say the least. The game is very practical about its detailing. While Everhood's locations are distinct enough, I'd say, much of the world is pure black with careful usage of color. Although I enjoy the style, I can't really say Everhood's overworld is all that pretty, not to suggest it's ugly, far from it, some areas are beautiful, but I wouldn't classify Everhood as particularly atmospheric. Color in general is huge in this game. If you're colorblind, you're honestly probably fucked. Not only are characters distinguished heavily by weird color alone, but this also extends to the battle system as well. The character portraits though are very detailed, even more than Off's. This game has a very character-centric story, and in that light, its characters are very well designed. I enjoy this game's art style, and it perfectly encapsulates the surreal vibe the game is aiming to achieve, but also succeeds in making everything look distinguishable. And wow, this game really likes to use visual effects, sometimes too much actually. It can be hard to see what the fuck is going on. It's all very overwhelming, not in a bad way, but this game takes the psychedelic imagery of Earthbound and places it on crippling ketamine withdrawal. This game even uses full 3D at times, again thank Unity for that. As for this game's soundtrack, it's super fucking good. easily one of the top contenders on this list for sure. You may have noticed this game's combat system resembles something between Guitar Hero and Bullet Hell, and god damn is it super fun. Despite being your average indie RPG where you talk to NPCs and walk around half the time, I'd say the combat more than makes up for it. There are several difficulties to choose from, and it can be really fucking challenging, okay? I chose the hard difficulty, which is the difficulty the game recommends, and you have to be focused in this game. It's less so memorizing attack patterns and more so adapting to this game's combat and making sure your reaction speed is on point. I'm convinced this game can cure short attention spans, you just have to be back quick. At no point did I find this game frustrating though. I always thought it was fair, especially since in this game there are no skills, status effects, or equipables. The SP's RPG standards are nowhere to be found in this game. Normally I'd say this would be a bad thing, but in Everhood's case I really don't think it matters. The game doesn't throw bullshit at you unless you increase the difficulty and fight secret bosses. If you do, then yes, you get bullshit. This game is genuinely fun. There's even a part of this game where you have to win a race, and there's commentary and everything. I absolutely love it. There's even classic Bullet Hell too if you like that. It doesn't surprise me that the fanbase has a big scene devoted to custom battles alone. It's just that good. As you progress through the world about as Everhood, you will encounter many unique, humorous, and standout characters. But first you'll encounter Blue Thief, the guy who just stole your arm. You're led to Gold Pig, who is not gold nor a pig, and proceeds to fucking kill you. Well, not exactly, but he's set up as the main villain going forward. Joining up with Blue Thief, you set to track him down. Much like Yume Nikki, you now have a hub world with many doors to choose from. Here you can meet the rest of the game's cast. I won't go over all of them since there are far too many for the sake of this review, but I have to mention Green Mage. You retrieve his eyeball for him after eons he has spent without it. Then he comedically betrays you as soon as you attempt to leave. And then you play Dungeons and Dragons with him. Not only with him though, but the rest of the characters you've encountered thus far. This game is quite slapstick with its humor and I for one enjoy it. You eventually defeat Gold Pig, get your right arm back, and that's it. The game is over.
Or is it?
Okay, spoilers begin now. It's here you are introduced to your actual objective. Kill everyone and everything. You even kill the save points, the doors, and the guy narrating for you. I like that there's actually a moment of hesitation before you do this. Is this really the right thing to do? It becomes apparent that the people living in Everhood have lived for a very, very long time. Green Mage has even tallied every year he has been in Everhood in a long corridor. And by long, I mean this takes hours to walk through. Your role then is to be this world's Reaper, to end their eternity of suffering and extinguish their lives. The problem is that people don't quite like being killed and will fight back. The game even gives you multiple opportunities to stop killing, should you change your mind. And if you don't kill at all, well, the frog would like to have a word with you. Yes, that's right, killing everyone is the normal route. It's what you're supposed to do. But there is a lot of content that opens up as a result of this. There are plenty of secret bosses and obscure endings you can get from this point on, some of which are quite tedious, such as collecting all the gems, or unbelievably difficult, as is the case with no-hitting the incinerator. And this is where I come to my biggest gripe with Everhood. It's Achilles' heel. Its length, or rather, lack thereof. Now I understand that a game, or a story moreover, is only as good as it is concise. That is true, but Everhood could really benefit from a longer runtime. This game brings up so many neat ideas and concepts and refuses to elaborate on them further. Take the main questline of killing everyone. It's supposed to be morally difficult, however once you start killing a few, the rest is pretty easy to decide. By the time you start killing you're maybe a few hours in, not long enough to establish any lasting or meaningful connection with these characters. I felt bad for killing Green Mage since he's a really fun and likable character, but for all intents and purposes I had just met him. Killing him to complete the questline was a no-brainer to me, and I didn't really feel any remorse. This extends to the story too. When I first finished the game I didn't understand a thing of what I just played. Take Red himself. There's this neat area with the mirror where he talks to himself, and it is later revealed that pink is concealed within red. And also we learn that these killing sprees have happened in the past, so how exactly does this fit all together? I get that Everhood is abstract, but it tries to have it both ways, since it also wants to tell the audience of a convincing world and characters. There are some theories you can read up online, but the fact of the matter is, it's still very confusing and I'm not really sure who Red or Pink even were. And that's a big problem considering they're supposed to be the protagonists. From the way I seen it, it was always the player's choice to kill, and Red just hid Pink from the blame. But don't quote me on that. I should mention this game also makes use of 4 fall breaks, but they're all pretty nonsensical and are irrelevant to the story. There are also the absolute truths that you hear throughout the game, which will sometimes spout nonsense at you. Yes, pee stored in the balls. I have no idea what to take away from this. I'm sure there's somebody out there who has studied all the hidden details in this game, and believe me, there are plenty, but I am not that person. That being said, if I am this confused simply by playing the game, I think it's evident that the writing could use some work, far from being terrible, but there's wasted potential here. And lastly, there's the ending, the normal one anyway. After everyone is slain and getting hospitalized for an LSD overdose, we end up here, with the Buddha. The Buddha! Everybody gets rid of their worldly attachments and finally accepts their passing. It's a really sweet ending. One problem. Doesn't this defeat the whole fucking purpose? Like, I am killing everyone here, and I am supposed to feel bad about doing it. But if there exists a good reunion after death, what's the point? I like the ending, but I'd much rather have it where you succeed in liberating everyone from their eternal torment, but you end up completely alone, or the game just flat out ends when your mission is complete. Kinda like what Off did. Death should have meaning. And okay, look, I don't want to have to do this, but I have to compare this game to Undertale. The developers of Everhood very clearly put a lot of care and effort into this game. The name of this video is comparing Earthbound RPGs though, so I think it's fair to say that I'm allowed to compare these games. And like it or not, these games are so similar that it's sometimes eerie. The comedy is exactly the same, the way the characters are presented is exactly the same. But you know what Undertale does but Everhood doesn't? Fully flesh out its story. The reason why killing everyone in Undertale is so hard is because it's generally done after most people complete the game normally and grown attached to these characters. I find it highly unlikely that any new player in Undertale would start the genocide route willingly, since you have to intentionally grind specific areas to do it. But with Everhood, the game just flat out tells you outright to kill everything that moves, and because of that, it lacks weight. Okay, upon further review of Everhood's story, I have revised some of my opinions. Pause to read them if you're interested, but otherwise, let's resume. No, Everhood isn't a fucking Undertale clone, that's not what I'm trying to say. They are two very different games and Everhood offers many things that Undertale does not. But what I am trying to say is that they have similar story beats, and Undertale frankly does them better. I'm sorry, but there's no way of sugarcoating that, it's just true. Regarding my placement above Off, I just find Everhood functions as a game better. Off also has a problem of not elaborating when it needs to, but Everhood is far worse in this aspect, albeit not to a serious degree. Everhood though has a great soundtrack and visuals that can compete with Off, and quite frankly, it's just way more fun. Way more. I initially had this game below Off, but the more I thought about it, I think Everhood deserves better, as much as I like Off. I find the stuff Everhood does simply too good to ignore. I just wish it expanded upon them. I will say the two games are relative though. As for why this game isn't any higher, we're about to enter the big leagues tier.
These games are for big boys only!
Everything past this point are games that have received some serious praise, and for good reason. Everhood is not one of them, unfortunately. This will make more sense as I discuss the games above it, but the long story short is that the games above have amazing stories and amazing gameplay, and unlike Everhood, their length doesn't cripple them. So yeah, that's Everhood. I could definitely talk about this game more, but as is, I think this is adequate. It's a fun, visually stunning experience, and one that I do recommend you should try out. It's a shame this game hasn't got more attention given its quality, even if I do have some qualms with it. Everhood is number 7.
Number 6.
I honestly have no idea how to rank this game. While Off is perhaps the most unique game here stylistically, Lisa's gameplay and matter of presentation is unlike anything here. Dare I say, unlike anything I've experienced in an RPG either. The devil is in the details though. I will explain why Lisa's here and not any higher, but this was the hardest game for me to rank. You can put this game anywhere between number 2 and number 6 and including, and I'd be okay with it. When I speak of Lisa, I'm actually referring to a trilogy of games. Lisa the First, Lisa the Painful, and Lisa the Joyful. This may sound unfair since the Mother series is also a trilogy, however I assure you that 90% of what I'll be talking about will be in Lisa the Painful, and Lisa the Joyful is just DLC to that game. I will speak very briefly about Lisa the First since it's an extremely short game, about an hour or two long, and not really required to play the Painful. Originally titled Lisa, this game was released in 2012 and made in RPG Maker. You play as a young girl named Lisa, whose life is strictly controlled by her abusive father Marty. One thing I will give this game credit for is how well this is conveyed. The disgusting imagery, the muffled TV noises, it all goes a long way to show the audience what's really going on.
Get off the game, go to the bathroom, and take a shit. What's
more is that every NPC in this game, even the background sometimes, are some form of Marty. It's a simple game much like Yume Nikki, even has a central lobby with doors, but I think it conveys its message well.
There is no escape.
That's all the praise I'm going to give it though. Although I really like the idea and how the story is presented, the game is just boring, even if it is short. The soundtrack is alright, and the visuals are good for what the game is trying to accomplish, but the gameplay is mundane. You just do fetch quests and bake puzzles. What would he do? I wouldn't mind it that much, were not for these fucking puzzles. Seriously, these puzzles are complete and utter bullshit and single-handedly extended my playtime 10 times over. I have no idea why they're so tediously difficult. Overall, I apologize if I'm rushing through this game, but it's not the game I wish to talk about. It's free, play if you want to understand Lisa's story better, but it falls into the vague symbolism rather than actual writing category.
Jesse, have you solved the Five Nights at Freddy's lore? Actually, Mr. White, I do believe I have.
Unlike Yume Nikki, which was the purpose of that game, this is trying to tell a much more concrete story. Looking at this game in isolation, it's just okay. I can't really say I enjoyed it. That's going to piss off some Lisa fans, but I'm sorry the original game just isn't it for me. I'd honestly rank it super low if this was the only Lisa game. Fortunately, this isn't about Lisa the First, it's about Lisa the Painful. And god what a game this is, when even Video Game Donkey, a guy who despises RPGs, praises your game, that's when you know you've done something good. Released in 2014, also originally titled Lisa, Lisa the Painful has you follow the story of a broken man, tackle injuries, diseases, and trauma as you struggle to survive and is testament to pain. Wait, I think I'm describing the wrong game. In Lisa the Painful, which I will now refer to as Lisa for the sake of simplicity, you play as Brad Armstrong, an absolute unit with a tortured past in a post-apocalyptic world with no woman.
Do you like tall girls or short girls?
Men. It's less Fist of the North Star and more like a MW2 lobby.
Oh, riot shield! I'm a pussy that use riot shield!
This game is the most explicitly mature on this list. While most of these games are lighthearted with mature undertones, Lisa is a mature game with a lot of humor.
It's okay, sport. We'll put that out. Hey, could you hand me that bucket of water? Ah, shit, there's a bucket of water right here. Hey, you fool!
The characters you encounter are just straight up assholes. This is a world of drugs, violence, swearing, loneliness, and these guys. This game does not handhold you whatsoever. It's meant to be a very unforgiving game. That being said though, I find this game to be the funniest on this list. The humor isn't for everyone, sure, but given how unapologetically explicit it is, I absolutely love it. I really like this one joke towards the beginning of the game where you meet a character who misses his wife and then shit talks her every second after. This brings me to Lisa's gameplay, which is its biggest strength, even more so than its story in my opinion. This game is completely 2D, it's not a bird's eye view, which allows it to implement some, albeit very basic, platforming elements. This game's replayability is number 1 on this list and by a significant margin, and I can assure you that everybody's experience of this game is different. Unlike other games here, in which your party members serve as integral parts of this game's story, here they are stand-ins and little else. There are a bunch of them you can recruit, some which are easy, and some which are a little harder to get. And they get fucking wiped in this game, dude.
Oh! Why would the— No!
My favorite example of this is when you are forced to play Russian roulette with your party. You can even return here later if you're cruel enough. You might get lucky and everybody lives, but you might not. On several occasions, a party member of yours can straight up die during the game's numerous events, which permanently changes how you play. This game has a resting mechanic much like other games. Doing so will cause you to sleep and regain HP. Or not. You are never safe in this game. If you sleep in the wrong area, your party member may have been poisoned, robbed, a party member might have been kidnapped, and you must pay ransom, or worst of all, your party members just straight up ditch you. I love it when it happens. There are also numerous occasions where you get ambushed and there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes these are just events localized to some areas and others are parts of the game's progression. Now normally, I wouldn't mind too much were it not for the fact that I can fucking see it coming. It defeats the purpose of an ambush, you know. There is no right or safe option in this game. You're constantly at risk here. Choices are a big part of this game. In this game, it's less so how the story will play out, and more so you choose how the game will play. On numerous occasions, you have to make a sacrifice. For example, do you cut off your arm, or do you leave your party members to die? It's all a matter of personal preference, and this has some serious consequence going forward, as it will significantly change this game's combat. Speaking of combat, let's talk about Lisa's combat system for a moment. Given that you have a wide selection of party members to choose from, what somebody will experience will differ greatly from person to person. There is an immense range of customizability here, and paired with Lisa's extensive, albeit initially confusing list of side effects, and you will find yourself with a great deal of choices and potential combos. Take a simple yet effective combo you can do. You can use Birdie to douse an opponent in alcohol, and then use Brad to light them on fire. Regular attacks also have combo inputs. These are a bit finicky, but they save on SP, this game's mana system. While I don't think this game's combat system is as intricate as some other games on this list, it is ever changing. Remember, through the choices you make, you are going to actively decide your gameplay. The story and gameplay are perfectly married here, and Lisa does the best job at solving the downtime problem I mentioned earlier. You may not be emotionally invested in your party members, but it's still a hard choice to make since you need them. And you do need them. While not the most challenging game here, it's definitely not easy either. I'd say Lisa manages its difficulty very well. This game also does the best job here at managing its economy system. You are constantly looking for EXP, money, and items. You have to be smart with what you spend and what you use because you only have so much. And don't forget, it can be taken away from you in an instant. There are also some more nuanced game mechanics, but I find it to be well done. Take Joy. It's a drug that Brad and some other characters can consume and receive a significant boost from, and it makes the game much easier. However, if you go without it for too long, these characters will go through withdrawal, which will weaken them considerably. What results is that you're quite literally forced to be addicted to Joy in order to progress easier, constantly scavenging for it. This all concludes in a phenomenal presentation. It's meant to be a tough and brutal journey, as well as a tragic one, and this manifests through its gameplay. The game is about disempowering the player, but never to the point where it feels too frustrating that they won't play. There's always a new objective and something to push forward to. This isn't even a mention of all the secrets this game offers. There are plenty of side quests and hidden areas you can encounter. I really cannot stress enough how well made this game is from a functional point of view. Its gameplay is easily the best on this list. Truth be told, if you're looking for a new experience, definitely play this game. It plays so much differently than everything else, and results speak for themselves. Okay, games are supposed to be fun, so since Lisa's gameplay is the best, Lisa is therefore the best. I'm sure some people would say yes, but this game is not free from sin. The artwork is good, not the best, but it gets the job done. There is just one problem. This game's atmosphere and worldbuilding is pathetically weak. This may sound like a minor complaint, perhaps one that is strongly debatable, but when comparing it to other games here, it's a huge drawback. So many of these games feature unique locations, intelligent use of color and music, and plenty of other storytelling methods to build up a location in the viewer's mind. Lisa features generic wasteland after generic wasteland. When I see a style, I want to think, oh, that reminds me of that game. Nothing reminds me of Lisa. Seriously, if I were to watch a friend play Lisa, all I can say is, oh, you're in that part of the game. Nothing specific. And for those who do think this is a minor complaint, One-Shot shits on that whole ordeal. One-Shot is a rather simple game all things considered, but its atmosphere is half the appeal of it. Yume also does this as well. Just because this game is apocalyptic doesn't mean you can't make your world seem special. I mean, just look at Fallout. I enjoyed how down to earth this game's characters are. They are selfish and perverted as you'd expect from this sort of scenario, but apart from this game's comedy, I never got attached to its world at all. A lot of this is due to Lisa's soundtrack and hold it! Shut the fuck up, let me explain. I know Lisa's soundtrack is beloved, and this is easily my most controversial take on this list. It's not that I think Lisa's soundtrack is bad, it's just okay. Yes, there are a few songs I like, and fuck it, allow me to play them. Did you enjoy them? Well, I'm sure you're going to remember every other song in this game, and oh, you're going to hear them over and over and over and over. Run. This game uses its songs so many fucking times it gets unbearable. The battle and overworld music is okay, but it pales in comparison to other games here. I never found the music to enhance this game's feel apart from a few select moments towards the end of the game. In that sense, yes, I do respect Lisa's soundtrack, but apart from that, I honestly don't understand why people enjoyed it so much. I didn't. It's just okay. I'm sorry I didn't like it as much as you did. And you know, if I was judging this game in isolation, I don't think I'd even bring this up. But Lisa's soundtrack is so outclassed by everything else here, it cannot hold its own. Yes, those are some serious strikes against it. But for all that I've complained about, I think this game's amazing gameplay more than makes up for it. But Lisa still does have a story to tell, so if you want a fun ride without knowing what happens, skip here. Lisa the First ends on a pretty ambiguous note. Want to know what happens? Here's the menu screen for Lisa the Painful. Yes, that's it. Minor complaint, I get the shock value factor, but I wish this changed after a while. There isn't even the game's logo. It looks super plain and underwhelming for a game of this caliber. The other menu screens here aren't inviting, contrary to what people say, but they are ominous and give off mystique. Lisa's menu screen is just boring. Brad is Lisa's older brother. Beaten and bruised, we walk him back home.
Come into my house, suck my dick, trick on me, Jay!
That is how you start a game. Welcome to Lisa, and the pain has just begun. Fast forward many years later, and we come across a baby, which happens to be a girl, making her the only female that we will come across this entire game. Her name is Buddy, and Brad raises her with his friends. What follows is this really beautiful intro sequence of Brad trying to raise the girl, quitting his addiction to joy, and as well as the lack of agency Buddy has in any aspect of her life. But oh no, the secret's out, and she's been stolen. Time to rescue the princess, yahoo! Immediately, Buddy becomes the center of attention. I really like these find her posters littered everywhere, and the game makes it obvious what the men intend to do to her. Lisa does have some extensive lore, but for an ordinary playthrough, the story is actually a minor aspect. The real story is the painful gameplay and sacrifices you will experience, but there are some points of interest. Throughout the game, you'll get hints of Buddy's whereabouts, and Brad shows absolutely no mercy. Anyone in his way, even his former friends, are cast aside in order to save Buddy. Buddy is his second chance, someone he genuinely loves. This game will force you into actions on Brad's behalf, which can be pretty uneasy to watch. Your friend won't tell you where Buddy is? Well, nothing a nail bat can't fix.
It was a mistake to come here.
Where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the fucking money, shithead?
There's this other moment where you choose to kill Sticky, another former friend, but Rick, the guy you beat to a pulp, begs of you to stop. Unlike the other choices in Lisa, this one is out of moral character rather than gameplay. It doesn't impact the ending whatsoever if you choose to spare him or not, it's up to you. When you do find Buddy, it's not as smooth as you'd hope it would be. She is scared of you and no longer trusts you, and if anything, desperately tries to avoid you due to how much you've been controlling her life. You forcefully take her info, but it isn't long until you're ambushed again.
Think fast, Chucklenut!
And then forced to swallow down drugs. Oh, and then have to choose between having her mutilated or not. That's nice. What Lisa really does well is gradually and subtly build up Brad's regrets. Sometimes, completely unexpectedly, you will encounter a flashback sequence that details Brad's past. You may see Marty, Brad's abusive father, or sometimes even Lisa herself. As the game continues, this imagery becomes more frequent. The exact specifics of Lisa's death and Brad's reaction are never explored completely, however it is very clear that Brad's attachment to Buddy is because of his loss of Lisa. And then comes my favorite moment in this game. You find out Marty's still alive. Out of dozens of painful flashbacks, hallucinating enemy encounters, and more, you're totally prepared to beat this guy to a pulp for all that he's done. But he seems different now, and Buddy, out of all people, is with him. He's old, and visibly a lot more caring. Brad isn't having it though, and it doesn't matter whether we choose to spare him or not. What results is not the satisfying revenge you'd expect, but a one-sided beatdown of a defenseless man in which Brad is blinded by anger. Buddy even jumps in to stop you, but she's helpless to do anything. Marty's name was slowly changed throughout the fight, eventually becoming Father. I was fully prepared to hate this guy, but by the end of it, I just felt bad. This wasn't the right thing to do, and it speaks to the genius of Brad's character. Brad is not a good person with bad means, rather he's a selfish person who will stop at nothing to live the life he's missed out on. You fucking kill people in this game, and it's not like the others, this game is quite gory and violent. Selfishness is a big aspect of Brad's character, as evident by the fact you can choose up to give your arms for the sake of your party. Despite it all, Brad will choose to fight the world to have Buddy to himself, to have his second chance. There are two other killers I should mention, first being Rando. He's one of the most powerful figures in this world, but a compassionate and nice guy. It is later revealed that he was a Brad student all those years ago, and now is terribly disfigured. The other being Buzzo, the guy who continuously fucks you over and forces you to make sacrifices. He has a score to settle against Brad, though this isn't fully explored until Lisa the Joyful, so I will refrain about talking about him for now. Lisa ends with Brad abandoning his party in order to rescue Buddy. Your party returns, but sides against you. Everybody in this world knows that Buddy is the key for the future of mankind, so they can't side with you anymore. This would be an emotional moment, were not for the fact that these fucks will abandon you at any given opportunity. What follows is Brad becoming a one-man army and plowing through Rando's men. The game makes you feel like a god, but the story disagrees.
Hello, Grandma. I need to sell your television.
You show down with Rando and duel each other as master and student, thus revealing a truly broken man. By this point though, it's too late, and acting as Buddy, you can choose whether to hug Brad or not. Brad's story then comes to a close. Brad was fighting against the world, he was never going to win. Sounds good, right? I love talking good about this game, but you know what I like more? Complaining and whining! You know Buzzo? And you know Joy? The drug Brad takes and can't get enough of, no matter how much he tries? Well, it turns out Brad was fucked from the beginning, because he turned into a mutant. There's this guy named Yato, and Buzzo worked with him to create and distribute Joy. What, you thought these mutations were because of radiation?
Don't you feel stupid? Don't you feel a little ashamed?
That's right, it was me all along. Exactly according to plan. Who would have guessed? This is such a fucking asshole, and I have no idea what it adds to the story. It wouldn't have changed anything had it not been there. But I still have more to talk about here, and by talk, I mean complain. In Lisa the Joyful, which I'll refer to as the Joyful, and the previous game as the Painful, as if things weren't confusing enough, you play as Buddy preceding the events of the Painful. I'm not even gonna bother with spoilers at this point, if you come this far, but skip here if you've only played the Painful. Now the Joyful has a lot of fans, but welcome to my video, let me do it my way! Apart from joining Rando for a brief moment, and he is really cool and I love him, we are mostly alone as Buddy. Buddy aims to take down the major powers of Olathe, the area this game takes place in, and become its ruler. Now I don't know about you, but I immediately spot some fucking problems here. The Painful did a good job at, well, being painful. As Brad, an absolute hulking figure with many party members, he felt strong, but the game constantly reminded you of what kind of world you were living in. With the exception of the end of the game, in which you're dying anyway, the game keeps you humble in what you can expect. You aren't even sure if you can find Buddy, let alone save her, when everybody's against you. Now take Buddy. She is completely alone and even more isolated than Brad ever was, yet she is an unstoppable killing machine. Turns out Brad taught her how to fight when she was younger, and she suddenly becomes a total badass who is second to none. Where was this Buddy in the Painful? Why didn't Buddy just slaughter Buzzo when he kidnapped her? Why did she let her face get carved up? To me, Buddy was capable and strong, sure, but she's still young and naive, and ultimately alone. The game went to great lengths to show that Buddy is scared and doesn't know to trust Brad anymore, and just desperately wants to make her own choices in life. I want to rule the world, show no mercy, foolish boy, young Armstrong, you will die! I'm sorry, I can't take her seriously. She talks like some edgy 14-year-old. Let's face it, that's the appeal of her character, isn't it? Kinda like Kara, this super edgy power fantasy. But the Painful was never about that. The Painful was about a broken man in a broken world. I like that Buddy wants to be independent and take care of herself, and hates the people that patronize her. That's fine, great even. But it should have been handled better. Point is, the Buddy in the Joyful is not the same Buddy as in the Painful. She feels like an abridged character. I like the concept, but it goes against what was established previously. But hey, at least the gameplay is good, and yeah, I can't have shit in this game. So what if we took everything good about the Painful and pushed it somewhere else? You know what was good about the Painful? The choices, the customizability, the party members, the secret areas, the replayability. Apart from secret areas, the Joyful doesn't have any of those. You play as Buddy for most of the game, and that's it. Yippee! And the fights are super boring. Credit where credit is due, it is difficult, and the items are sparse. At first. Once you unlock your healing move, the game just becomes a slideshow. The epitome of this is the big Lincoln fight. You just spam the same shit over and over for 5 minutes or more, and then you win.
Yes, yes. Yes, look at this guy.
Buddy has these timing moves, but they're very gimmicky and add very little to the game. The gameplay is a shadow of what the Painful offers. There are new tracks, but given what I said previously, yeah, you can be the judge of what I think about it. It's okay. I like some tracks, but I'm not remembering this game for its soundtrack. The exception being the song that plays during the end. I actually thought it heightened the emotional tension. Good job. Another thing I do enjoy is how it treats Rando. His character gets expanded upon, and I like how Buddy gets increasingly irritated as he more and more reminds her of Brad. The problem is when Rando ultimately dies, Buddy has no consequence. Buddy doesn't become any less alone or more vulnerable, and hell, the game becomes easier from this point on if anything. It's a nice concept with terrible execution. So you now have a painful constant to remind you of Brad's regret regarding Lisa's death? Well, we're gonna do that again! Except this time with Brad and Rando. I like that Buddy bears the burden of effectively killing her family, and the emotion she feels because of it, but it is so rushed. It lacks the effectiveness of what the painful achieves just because there's no scene where Buddy just sits down and grieves. There's no moment equivalent to Brad killing his father, all this occurs towards the end of the Joyful, and there's no time to settle. Which brings me to Buzzo. Oh my fucking god, Buzzo. Can we talk about Buzzo for a minute? Let's talk about Buzzo for a minute. Turns out Buzzo and Lisa were in a relationship, and Lisa manipulated Buzzo into doing terrible things, like mutilating animals for some reason. Buzzo is so fucked up by Lisa dying that he entirely blames her death on Brad. Not only that, but he's a good person all of a sudden. He apologizes for his misdeeds and gives you the only vaccine of joy. But wait, there's more! It was all part of Yato's plan for Buddy to end up with the hands of Brad. It was me all along and fuck off! This makes me mad beyond belief since it shits on otherwise good writing. Why the fuck is this necessary? Why make Lisa manipulate Buzzo? What the fuck does it add to the story? What difference does it make that Yato's a mastermind of everything? It reminds me of the shit Naruto did, not necessarily a retcon, but it's super contrived and makes the entire story feel cheap. And then there's Buzzo himself. I'm not against him turning good, but he just suddenly does it! And it's off screen too! What a letdown of a character, seriously. Anyway, the game tries to do the same thing with the Marty fight, except you fight a hallucination of Rando and then Brad. This would have worked were not for the fact that it's so rushed. Anyway, we win, and we choose to take the vaccine or not. Now, Lisa is a game all about choice, but why the fuck would I not choose to take it? I don't get it. If you couldn't tell, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the Joyful. I don't hate it, far from it, but it's a far cry of what the Painful achieves. It should have been a standalone game instead of DLC. That would have fixed everything. It would have given more time to build Buddy and Buzzo's character, and would have given more time for new gameplay features to be implemented, instead of what we got. I just find the Joyful to be incredibly weak and lacking in impact. I get that people love Buddy, but she got done dirty. Am I alone for thinking like this? Everywhere I go I see praise of this game.
So as a final verdict, I'd say it really hits all of the points I wanted it to.
There's also a DLC expansion that offers a small sequel with equal quality to the main game.
But to me, it just comes across as good ideas with not enough time to play them out. Maybe I'll get hated on for this, but just because the Painful is good doesn't make the Joyful good necessarily. And that's Lisa. Overall, extremely solid and experienced like none other. It really is a refresher after the samey gameplay of many of these other games, and a damn interesting story at that. Really, the only reason why I don't put this game any higher is because of personal preference really. But if you rank Lisa higher, I won't complain. Seriously, this game is awesome. Lisa is number 6.
Number 5, number 4.
If I had to bet on which games on this list are most popular, I'd bet on these two. Even if you've never played them before, you've no doubt seen them, or at the very least heard their music before. Right off the bat, I'm saying Undertale is better than Deltarune. I'll explain as to why as I go on, but for now keep that in mind. Even if you don't agree with that statement, I think we can all agree that these games should be played side by side. They are extremely similar in all ways, made by the same guy, and Deltarune is a pseudo-sequel to Undertale. Thus far, I have talked about each game from worst to best. However, here I'll talk about Undertale first. It's kind of impossible to talk about Deltarune without talking about Undertale beforehand. I mean, the game even flat says this game is meant for people who have completed Undertale. Undertale was released in 2015 by Toby Fox, then a relatively obscure developer who had worked on music for Homestuck, as well as ROM hacks for Earthbound. Varric, I have fucking had it with your shit. You little fuckers are going to have your bodies ripped in half. I'll shove your asses so far down your throats that when you crap, you'll be singing fucking Beethoven. TLDR, eat shit! I see Toby's writing has improved a bit. It wasn't long until this game blew up, and boy did it. There was a sort of Undertale mania at the time. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing someone talk about this game. Every big YouTuber played it, there was an abundance of theories, and even to this day the Undertale community is thriving. At the beginning of the game, you were greeted with this neat little intro sequence detailing the war between humans and monsters, and how the monsters were banished into the underground. You play as a human child who falls into the underground, and you must find your way out. This game has a simple premise. This is an RPG where nobody has to die. In this game, you can choose to spare opponents instead of killing them. Killing or not killing will greatly impact this game's story. If you kill certain characters, then dialogue and scenes will be changed, and there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of unique endings. Before I talk about this game's story, let's talk about everything else first. First off, the visuals, and sorry, there's no way of getting around this. Undertale's graphics are bad. Yes, I know the old saying, graphics don't matter, gameplay does. But that is no excuse when even older RPGs look absolutely beautiful with their sprite work. For as much as I love Undertale, I think its visuals are by far the worst on this list, and it's sort of telling when you look at fan mods that look gorgeous by comparison. This isn't a huge complaint, mind you, and there are some very atmospheric parts of the game, especially Waterfall, but all in all, this game could really use a visual upgrade. The best parts of this game visually are when you get these wide shots of the environment. This happens a few times, and it's a sign of you getting closer to the end. It looks really beautiful. This game does something quite similar to Off in that its character sprites are purely black and white. However, it doesn't quite work as well as Off, since this only happens in battle. Character overworld sprites are in full color, which kinda defeats the purpose. I'm not a big fan of this game's puzzles either. They're all mind-numbingly easy, and only serve as roadblocks in your progression. There's just one switch puzzle I like in Hotland, but that's about it. This game's combat is quite different to what you expect in an RPG. You have two options when defeating an opponent, either attack or spare them by way of talking to them. Both of these are very boring. Attacking has you do a timed input that barely changes apart from a few items. There are no skills you can learn, so no fancy attacks, healing moves, shields, nothing. You only have one party member as well, so it gets stale really fast. The sparing mechanic isn't much better. On some fights you actually have to figure out what you have to do, which is nice, but it doesn't change the fact that the battle doesn't change, and sometimes it's no better than the RPG age-old spam the attack button. What this game's combat does to excel at though, and what makes it fun, is the bullet hell. Undertale's combat is entirely skill-based. You have to dodge and weave in between enemy attacks, and it's clear that a lot of effort went into making this work. Sometimes the game will force you into playing differently depending on the boss, and it's a really nice change of pace. Apart from a certain alternate route, which I'll talk about later, I found Undertale to be in a perfect Goldilocks zone of not being too easy, but also not being too hard. Now if you play Toho, you may scoff at this, but nobody cares about your anime girl game, so eat shit and die. Overall, I find the combat to be fun, challenging, and engaging. I can't really praise it as an RPG combat system, since that's not what it is, but it works well. Undertale's economy system isn't so great. Can you tell that I think Undertale's gameplay is mediocre? There's no customizability in items, you just buy the next good item from a shop, which you will have more than enough money for. As for this game's soundtrack, Undertale is number 1 on this list. I do not want to have any debate surrounding this. There's a game above it, but I think does a better job at incorporating its soundtrack into enhancing the overall experience. But no game beats Undertale's boss themes, just listen to this. Undertale's soundtrack really has everything it needs. The entire soundtrack is good, and I do mean the entire soundtrack. There are relaxed songs, upbeat and fast songs, creepy ones, and more. There are people who have gotten to this game simply by its soundtrack alone, and it really shows. It has even been played in front of the Pope before. Every time you see on the news that Toby Fox is working on a game, the internet goes wild, since everybody knows how good his music is. A constant point of praise to Undertale are its characters, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt that they are the reason why people like this game so much. I think Undertale's characters are good, but not great. I know that might upset some people, but hear me out. This game is about 6 hours in length, which is long enough. However, Undertale has far too many characters for that time span. You tag along with 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 characters, and arguably more. Listen, if you strongly identify with these characters and think they're incredibly deep, you are living in a very small bubble. Now, I'm not upset at the game for this. Undertale is not trying to have an in-depth character analysis. However, what I am saying is that all of these characters are quite shallow because each only gets so much screen time. Take Undyne. She is racist. Towards humans. Until you convinced her that racism is bad. Yay. Then you help her get a lesbo GF, and that's basically her entire character. She's strong, tomboyish, proud, and that's pretty much it. Yes, I know people bring up what she does in the alternate route, but it's really not that complicated, okay? Or take Papyrus. He's a fan favorite, funny, and wholesome 100.
Did you just say wholesome 100? Are you a Redditor?
He believes in you until the end and wants you to become stronger, but he's just too nice. I don't need to explain anything more here. This game follows a repetitive pattern. You meet flawed person. You converse or fight with flawed person. Flawed person becomes good. Rinse and repeat. Again, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Undertale is all about accepting others and talking things over, if only the community can learn that lesson. But I hope you can forgive me when I say that I can't exactly praise Undertale's characters, they're all very basic. Despite the mediocre visuals, Undertale's worldbuilding is great. It's simple, yet effective. The music really goes a long way conveying this, and the fact that your actions have serious consequence in this game convinces me that this world is actually alive and responsive. Undertale's world is something you have to experience, not something you are told, and if you're not exactly aware of what I mean by that, I'll now go in depth about Undertale's story. I actually do recommend you skip here if any party desires to play this game. It's meant for people who don't know what they're getting into, but without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so why did Undertale blow up? If you ask me, it had to do with how innovative its story was for its time. If you look at Undertale's story at face value, it's pretty average. A human falls into the underground and befriends the king's son. Both children tragically die, and now a new human, a player, must venture through the underground and determine its fate. Yes, the reunion of Asriel at the end of the game is heartfelt, but it's not anything special. Read any sad story, and it'd evoke the same reaction. No, what made Undertale's story good was its meta-narrative. Oneshot does this well, and I'm sorry Oneshot fans, but Undertale does it infinitely better. Subverting expectations is what Undertale is all about. Now, I don't want to get into the belief that subverting expectations equals good. I mean, just look at The Last Jedi, how well that turned out.
You can fly? No. Jump good.
But when your plot has a sense of direction and you actually know what the fuck it is you're doing, you can create a compelling narrative. Undertale's premise is simple. It's an RPG where nobody has to die. Now look, I know it's nobody's business to tell someone how to play their game. I mean, hell, I spent half my hours in Gmod in single player killing myself, but with Undertale it's different. I've seen some videos recommending Undertale or Deltarune as something people who have never experienced games before should play, but this is wrong. Undertale assumes that you've played an RPG before. I cannot stress that enough. When you go into an RPG, you are used to beating the NPCs, doing their quests, and killing your enemies. The more you kill, the stronger you get. This is how the game starts. The tutorial flower fucking tries to kill you! This shocked me when I first played the game, and it's one of the reasons why Undertale stood out at the time. Undertale is trying to be very different to what you're used to. As mentioned earlier, you can spare or kill opponents. However, it might not be immediately obvious as to why you should ever spare one, as it gives 0 EXP and you don't grow any stronger. RPG logic dictates that you should kill. If you've been doing this throughout the game, then by the end of it, you'll be greeted by this scene. You will be judged for every EXP you've earned. What's EXP? It's an acronym. It stands for execution points. Oh shit. That is what Undertale is trying to do. It tries to convince you that it's an ordinary RPG, at first, but as you go on, you begin to see that your actions have consequences. Take the fight with Toriel. She serves as your guidance tutorial in the early portion of the game. Inevitably, she prevents you from leaving, and you must fight your way out. Now you can spare her, but to a new player, it's not immediately obvious this does anything. Her dialogue barely changes, so instinctively, you think that there's no other option, and you kill her. If you feel bad about it, and reload your save file, once you realize you can spare her, Flowey, the flower from earlier, calls you out. This is what makes Undertale special. There are so many unique dialogue options and interactions depending on what you do. Saving and resetting are not tools that the player can use like in other games, rather they are part of the story itself. There is no point in this game where you're safe, and I recommend this video by Merg if you want more details on this subject. When I first played this game, I thought it was the coolest shit ever. The game remembers what I did? Whoa! I've grown up a bit since then, but I still think Undertale does this extremely well. I promise not to care about fandoms in this video, but with Undertale I do have to make a small exception. Back when Undertale was extremely popular, the fandom collectively decided on a set of headcanons, and more importantly, the belief that the true pacifist route is how the game should be played. This especially harmed Markiplier's playthrough of the game, since he was harassed by fans who thought he was playing the game wrong. But this defeats the whole purpose of Undertale. You were supposed to make mistakes and restart your game to get a better ending. It's written into the story itself. I hate the bullshit of, oh, make sure to spare everybody. No, fuck off. Let people experience it for themselves and make their own decisions. This video by the RPG manga goes into more detail about this, but I felt like I needed to say this since people mistakenly believe Undertale is a game where nobody dies. It's not. It's a game about playing God. So time to talk about this game's endings. If you play the game normally, you have to fight Asgore, the king of all monsters. He destroys your mercy option, so this is the only part of the game where you are legitimately forced to fight. After defeating him, Fly will choose to kill him, even if you do spare him. What follows is my favorite part of the game. You are no longer in control of your own save file, Flowey is. And what the fuck is that? This fight relies entirely on shock value alone, and I absolutely love it. If you die, he'll do a little trolling and crash your game. During the fight, he will save and reload, which will constantly change your position. After using the power of friendship to defeat him, you are left with a difficult conundrum. You know Flowey is irredeemable and the most evil character you've met, but you can choose to spare him anyway. Doing so will cause him to remind you that he has no intention of honoring this mercy of yours. If you continue to spare him though, he will break down and later gives you advice on how to get the good ending. On that good ending, I do like it. The reveal of the fallen child and Azrael that happens in normal routes is really beautiful, especially with the music. So getting to see Azrael as Flowey all along is a good twist in my opinion, and really screams Undertale's message of forgiveness and understanding. Although the fight looks cool, it's pretty underwhelming for a final boss. You functionally cannot lose. But whatever, look at this cool ending of the Earthbound style credits. Everybody's happy now. Or are they? In the community dubbed genocide route, you become your average germ larper and kill everybody you don't like. This includes all the killers you've met in your journey, and it's supposed to be a gut-wrenching thing to do.
Hello, bozo.
I like this drop because you become what a Flowey is. A guy who toys with the world just to see what happens. You are the villain here. In order to progress, you have to exterminate the monsters in each area and level up. And yes, I know it's supposed to be boring because it's grinding, but counterpoint, video games are supposed to be fun. But Genocide route is boring for most of it. I know what game wants you to switch off, but that doesn't excuse it. There are only 2 boss battles here, and they are frustratingly difficult. I like the challenge though, and for as much as it has been memed into oblivion, I do love the Sans fight. It's the most unique fight in this game, with him dodging, teleporting, and attacking you in the menu. It's a genuine challenge, and it'll take you a while to learn all his attack patterns and beat him. Finally we meet Kara, the first human to fall into the underground, and we give him our soul. GG. I do like the fact that if you restart the game after this, you're still fucked. And that's Undertale. To be honest, I won't put it anywhere close to the best games of all time, but I respect it for what it's worth. Now that the years have gone by, I think it's become more acceptable to criticize Undertale, because back then, a few years ago, that was not the case. Well, I understand it's all very subjective, but I still find Undertale to stand out well even today. The story's clever, the music is great, and the game is fun. I'm still not entirely confident putting above Lisa though. I suppose this is just a matter of personal preference. Lisa, although definitely better written than Undertale, and a more sound game overall, just didn't have the same impact to me as Undertale did. Undertale really has a charm of its own, and it's no surprise that so many people try to replicate it. Yiik may have tried to be the postmodern RPG, but I think Undertale is the true modern successor to Earthbound. Both games are very different, but Undertale has replicated the same appeal of Earthbound, and to great effect. I've replayed this game plenty of times, and I still enjoy it with each go. Do play Undertale. And now onto Undertale's spin-off, or sequel, or whatever it is, Deltarune. Chapter 1 of Deltarune released in October 2018 as Survey Program to mask its release. There isn't much to say about Deltarune, but I haven't really said with Undertale. They are extremely similar, so I'll instead point out in ways they are different. Right off the bat, Deltarune is an unfinished game. As of making this video, there are only 2 chapters. Depending on how future chapters go, Deltarune can either rise or fall on this list, but for now I'm putting it side by side with Undertale, because to be honest, I see Deltarune as an extension of Undertale, if anything. In Deltarune we play as Chris, another ambiguously gendered child in a world of only monsters. Except the world Deltarune presents is very different. There are Undertale characters here on the surface with no relation to the previous game, as far as we know so far, as well as plenty of new characters and concepts too. Deltarune differs from Undertale in that your choices don't really matter. The game promises to only have one ending, and there are points in which the game prompts you to make a decision, only to not cater at the last second. The game's intro sequence offers you a chance to customize your character, only to realize you're forced as Chris. It's brief, but it does a good job of making the player wonder what that opening sequence was, and how the game will unfold. Deltarune does improve on Undertale in a few notable aspects. For one thing, and this may be a personal preference, but I do find the artwork to be better. There are some pretty cool visual effects that Undertale simply does not use, and I generally like the area designs a whole lot more. Combat has received a notable upgrade. You have multiple party members now, and there's a spear meter, so no more pressing random inputs into the work. Each party member actually has skills now, which removes the brain-dead simplicity problem I had with Undertale. Best of all, you still got to experience that sweet bullet hell.
Just because I had a dream of being pounded in the ass, and I was aroused when I woke up, doesn't make me gay.
I do have two complaints though. As of now, apart from using the well, there is no way of actually killing enemies, which defeats the purpose of having a fight option in the first place. I get the whole your choices don't matter thing, but this is just stupid and removes potential nuance from the game. My other point of contention is that this game is a lot easier than Undertale. Maybe it's just that I've gotten better at the combat, but I didn't die a single time when I played Deltarune, on both chapters mind you. The only fights in this game that are actually challenging are the secret boss fights and this fucking teacup scene, and as per usual, Toby Fox's music is gold. I would put a spoiler warning right now, but as of now, there isn't much to spoil. I feel like the appeal of this game is less of the game itself, and more so of a fan phrase and speculation that has resulted from it. Mostly around this guy. Instead of exploring the underground, we explore the dark world, inhabited by darkners, whereas everybody else is a lightener. So Toby is a racist. In the two chapters that are out so far, we join Susie, the girl boss character, Rouse, the prince, not fucking girl, okay, from the dark, who has a lot of fan art about him. And lastly, Noelle. I can't really say they offer the best party dynamic, however their personalities are interesting and quite pronounced. In other words, Deltarune does a good job at making its characters entertaining. This is echoed by the fact that Deltarune retains Undertale's comedic style. Want to throw Rouse? Get this banana? Create this hideous abomination? Your choices may not matter, but this game sure is in your face about it. That's something I enjoy a lot, but there's no way in hell this game is going to age well in a few years. Looking at you, Birdly. Not all of Deltarune's characters are part of your party though. In fact, most aren't. It's hard to tell which direction these will go, but if I had to guess, I'd still consider the Undertale direction, where there'll be a big reunion at the end. So far, it's not just you meet character and solve their problem, it's more so you meet character and each one is different. So do I think Deltarune's writing is better? So far, yes actually. You'll meet some really entertaining villains, Lancer, Jevil, King, Queen, Birdly, and yes, even Spamton. Although there has been no escape from this guy on the internet, he is worth talking about for a moment. I don't think his character is really as complex as people make it out to be. Take away his schizophrenic dialogue, and all you're left with is somebody who is very confused and energetic. Not much to go off there. That being said, Spamton offers a sense of mystery to the story. It's less so important as to who or what he is, and more so important as to why. Deltarune is building towards a greater narrative here, and that is something that Undertale lacked. It's playing the long haul and setting up mysteries that I expect to be answered far later. Not to suggest Undertale doesn't do this completely, look at Flowey for that, but Deltarune seems to be taking it in a more efficient direction. Take this for a moment. You're practically done with chapter 2 and Chris rips out his soul, and the only thing you can do is watch. The way how Undertale and Deltarune can escalate things extremely quickly is one of my favorite aspects of their writing. It can get dark real fast. Chris will then return, and you're left in awe of what the fuck just happened. And perhaps the best example of all, Noelle. Why kill everyone yourself when you can manipulate vulnerable people into doing it for you? Deltarune allows you to do this, and while I don't think it's as fucked as killing all your friends in Undertale, people have a preference to Deltarune because it's new, but more of that later, it's still pretty fucked. It's hard for me to give any solid opinions on Deltarune's writing, since from here, it can get much better, or it can go really south. Never underestimate the speed in which a story can fuck up. One thing I particularly don't like at the moment is although Noelle is stated to be a childhood friend of Chris, we never see that for ourselves. Who cares if that's who she is? This brings me to my conclusion of ranking Deltarune. Is it better than Undertale? No. And for those who say yes, have you actually gone back and played Undertale? Does Deltarune improve on Undertale's gameplay and writing? For sure. But even if it is better as of now, Undertale is still a complete story. Its characters have full arcs, its universe has been explored well, it's paced well, its fights are fun, etc. The only thing Deltarune has as of right now is a few plot points regarding to the nature of Chris's origin in the Dark World, and no, the overall doesn't count. These are all characters from Undertale, and we haven't done anything of note yet. I get that it's fun to theorize about this game, but put down your glasses for a moment and face the music. Deltarune won't be better than Undertale until it has fully explored its themes. People have a bias to Deltarune because they're going with knowledge of Undertale, and Deltarune is the hot new thing. But this game still suffers from a huge cast in an otherwise small game, just like Undertale. And if you don't really enjoy this game's humor, then you probably won't enjoy any of it. It's clear that Toby wants to push Deltarune in a different direction than Undertale, as he should of course, but right now, Deltarune just isn't there yet. I apologize if my analysis of Deltarune has been fairly bare bones, but most of it will just be me brainlessly summarizing the plot while rehashing the same points of criticism and praise I did for Undertale. If you're interested in Deltarune, and by that I mean once you're done with Undertale and want more, go play it. It's good and free for the time being. Toby is really going all out with it, and I could very well see it surpass his previous work. But as it stands right now, I think it's fair for me to put it alongside Undertale. We will just have to see. Deltarune and Undertale are ranked 5 and 4, respectively.
Number 3.
So here we are, the game, the myth, the legend, Earthbound. Mother 2 was released in Japan in 1994, and then released a year later in the US, now renamed Earthbound. I will not be covering the original Mother game, because nobody cares about that Squid game. And boy did this game have an interesting marketing campaign. This game stinks! Something to keep in mind going forward, although Earthbound might not be too unique in comparison to the games I'm covering, it definitely was for its time. Although initially a flop in the US, the very existence of this video is proof enough of Earthbound's success. Earthbound is a very divisive game, which I'll get into, but I need to first preface this by saying this game is not for everybody. Yes, it is a cult classic for sure, and I do think its good reputation is warranted, but when you play this game for yourself, you'll quickly find it has many problems. In Earthbound you play as Viscount, Ness. Future Trunks, i.e. Buzz, comes from the future to warn you about the evil Gygas. You are destined to defeat Gygas, and thus begins your quest to travel across the world and collect 8 melodies from sanctuary locations to gather the power of the earth. What Earthbound is perhaps most remembered for is its quirky style, and despite playing each and every one of these games, I still find Earthbound to be the best at doing this. No other game matches Earthbound's style as well as Earthbound itself. It has a feel when you play it. I thought it would be numb to how weird these games are, but I consistently enjoyed Earthbound. I think this largely has to do with the fact that Earthbound doesn't take itself seriously for most of the game. It's just taken for granted that Earthbound's world is weird. This extends to the characters too. Ness, along with other party members, can use psychic abilities, or PSI. Why Ness has these powers is never explained, it's just part of the world. One thing I'll immediately say is despite the age of the game, I'm still drawn to this game's sprite work. I find it looks fantastic, easily the best sprite work on this list in my opinion. Everything is detailed and stands out extremely well. It just goes to show how well designed the cartoony characters are. Earthbound draws a lot from Peanuts, and it really shows. I really like how this game handles color. Take Nightmare Town Freed. Now take a look at it after all the zombies are gone. Earthbound is a love letter to the suburban/small town environment. I love each and every area visit in this game, it's all very recognizable. I also really love the psychedelic backgrounds this game uses. This game has some stunning visual effects for an SNES game. And don't even get me started on the PSI effects. If you weren't convinced by this game's visuals already, take a look at Foresight. Everything is at a 45-degree angle and it looks beautiful. I wish games more incorporated angles into their art instead of 90-degree turns all the time. Then there's Moonside, which speaks for itself, easily the most visually unique area in this game. Then you have the game's soundtrack, and I was astonished at how many tracks I was familiar with despite not having played the game before. Whenever you make a piece of media, you want a good hook, something to draw the audience in and pay attention. Despite the balance issues here, the first area of the game, Oneshot, does a fantastic job at this. Not only does the music give off such a charming vibe, this is also where the bright artwork and quirky characters really shine through. I knew I would love this game as soon as I got here. Earthbound does have the same issue as Lisa in that it reuses a lot of its tracks though. It is an SNES game, and over 20 hours long, so it is a given. I still can't excuse it though, and some tracks do get annoying. I enjoy Earthbound's soundtrack, but I wouldn't put it anywhere near the top category. It does a good job of enhancing the overall experience, and again really speaks of Earthbound's unique feel, but I can't objectively say it stands out today. What Earthbound does well though, is world building. Apart from Earthbound's unparalleled charm, each area stands out, and some significantly so, Dalam especially, which is based off the Middle East and South Asia. Earthbound's world is fucking huge. I was surprised at just how much I have to walk into this game. On certain occasions you have to backtrack to areas once something has changed. I love when games do stuff like this, seeing how the map has changed since I left. This is a game where you're going to talk to each and every NPC to progress forward, but never did I find it tiring. Earthbound's map is big, but it also gives you a clear sense of direction, and as you gradually collect each melody, you inch further to your goal. While I didn't find Earthbound as funny as Lisa, I still find the subtle humor still holds true today. I especially like this dungeon where you fight Moas but each claim the third strongest of the bunch. And this is the point where I have to hound on Earthbound. Yes, I like the game and sorry to hate on your queer representation, but this game has problems. The gameplay, the fucking gameplay, dude. Let's just get the nitpicks out of the way first. Each character in Earthbound has a different inventory, in 14 slots only. There's no way to increase it. A novel idea, it pressures you to consider what you actually need, at first.
You picked the wrong house, fool!
You may notice that Earthbound features shops, and there are a lot of them. So, want to try a new item? Well, fuck you, not only does it never tell you what a new item does, you probably won't even have room for it. Buying items is a chore in and of itself, since you have to go to an ATM, withdraw money, go to a store, buy an item one at a time, and repeat for each character. Early on, the game gives you a bicycle, but as soon as you get an additional party member, you can never use it again. There's no way to move faster. To be honest, I didn't find this much of a problem, but it definitely would have saved some time in the long run. Another issue is teleporting, where you must have a very clear line of sight or else it won't work. Fuck, this is annoying. Again, I don't think this was that bad, a small nuisance if anything, but it shouldn't have been a feature in the first place. Now for the real reason why so many people hate Earthbound, and trust me I hate it for this part too, the combat. No, the combat itself isn't bad, but rather the quantity of it is. This game bombards you with enemy after enemy after enemy. Earthbound dungeons are wars of attrition, and this is especially bad in the early game where you have little money and little items. Once I got Paula, I rarely got a game over, but before, I got it pretty much all the time. It also doesn't help the fact that there's no way to clear a room. Enemies will always spawn off screen no matter what. Earthbound has this neat little feature where if you sneak up on an enemy, you will be granted a free turn. The problem is that Ness is so fucking fat and slow, you can never outrun an enemy. Ever! So this rarely comes of use. Your only option of avoiding enemies is to use this exploit where you despawn them off screen. Apart from some late game boss battles, Earthbound's bosses are relatively easy. The challenge instead is actually getting to them with full health and items due to the amount of enemies you face. It's honestly unbelievable. And for most of the game too, I can't really say it's all that interesting. This game uses a rolling HP mechanic, which I thought was an exploit at first, but no, it's intentional. Basically, if you get KO'd, you have a window of opportunity to replenish HP before you're gone for good. A neat concept, but it's only really useful late game when you have a lot of HP to spare. The worst example of this comes by way of Magic Int. Towards the end of the game you explore the mind of Ness, and it's a really interesting window into what has otherwise been a silent protagonist that we would know very little about. It's incredibly interesting both with lore, music, and visuals, until you realize there's enemies here too. Not the black balls of death again. The enemies here don't even tell you much about Ness either, it's just the same shit you see everywhere else. Bit of a waste if you ask me. By the way, if you get a game over in the late game, you are fucked. You have to go to the hospital to revive your party members since they start up as dead. You need to go to a hotel for PP, depending on your area, this might take a while to get to. So enjoy just playing as Ness for a while and having to restart entire dungeons, and oh, your items will not come back. I honestly don't understand how people can play this game without save states like I did. It must be torture for the amount of bullshit this game throws your way. Now the game's gameplay is not all bad, I am exaggerating a little bit of what I've said, although only a little. Sadly for most of the game, the combat is kind of ass. It just spam your most powerful attack and kill yourself once you inevitably miss. By the late game though, things do get more interesting. Your party members will be at their strongest extent, and you will fight enemies that you can't brute force your way through, Starman Deluxe and Diamond Dog are good examples of this. You'll have to use a wide variety of moves, including shields, attacks, status effects, and more to win, all while taking full advantage of the rolling HP mechanic. Late game combat is genuinely fun and challenging if you don't abuse items too much, by far my favorite part of Earthbound, and it's the reason why I can't say the gameplay is all bad. The combat is fun and complex, but it takes a long time for it to get that way. On a brighter note, there are periods of the game which will spice up the gameplay. You'll play as Jeff alone and later Pooh alone, and there's this really interesting part of the game where Paula gets kidnapped and it's just Ness and Jeff. Moonside is really cool. No is yes and yes is no. So what about that story? Well, despite being a game on which many story-based games look for inspiration, Earthbound doesn't really have much of a story. Not to suggest you need a complex story or narrative to have a good game, but Earthbound could have really benefited from it. You meet Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, yes that's his name. None have a unique reason for joining Ness apart from, they are a friend you haven't met before.
And I love you!
These characters are cardboard cutouts. I hesitate to even call them characters. There's barely a moment of interaction between these four. I'm supposed to take these four as friends going on an adventure, but they almost never talk to each other. I also took more thought from the character designs and archetypes. Take Jeff. He's got a nerdy appearance with the glasses and the suit. He's the only party member that cannot use PSI, but he makes up for it with gadgets that serve as utility. You can also buy him bottle rockets, which can nuke an opponent. The only remotely complex character is Porky. He serves as your friend at first, before he betrays you and screws you over throughout the game, but I will talk more about him in the Mother Free segment. Now, I'm not saying a complex character is automatically a good character. Take Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender. She doesn't change much, yet she still adds a lot to the show. But the thing is, Toph had a purpose and brought up an interesting dynamic with the other characters, but I think everyone would agree that they are no Zuko. Earthbound's characters do neither, and I rarely care about anyone apart from Ness. Ness has some really interesting moments in that he gets homesick from time to time and has to call his mother. So yeah, sorry, the story is a weak point. It's not bad, again Earthbound doesn't need a complex story, it's Earthbound, but there is a wasted potential here. Despite how much of a slog the game is sometimes, its unique charm and fun battle system drove me forward. I did enjoy what I was playing. I'm going to talk about Earthbound's finale now. I think most people are familiar with it, so full speed ahead, but in case you really don't know what it is, and don't want to get spoiled, skip here. And boy, what a finale it is. After watching Boku no Pico and becoming Jesus, we are ready to fight Gygas now that we have reached all Sanctuary locations. After a quick return to Onet, we must travel to the past and undo the future that is Gygas. One small problem. The phase distorter does not accept organic material, so Ness and his friends must transfer the souls into robots. And this is where the game takes a huge tonal shift. Upon reaching the past, it's immediately obvious that shit is about to go down. The cave is creepy, you make these eerie robotic noises when you walk. And everybody apart from Ness looks the exact same now. You are quite literally lifeless. There's no way to return back or buy items, so good luck. Now, up until this point, Earthbound has been relatively lighthearted and fun. Sure, there are some mature themes here and there, but when I am playing, I'm not going, whoa, this is an allegory to how cults work. Leave that to the theorists, and let's face it, this will fly over most kids' heads. Gygas has been built up throughout the game as this great evil, but I mean, come on, it's Nintendo. Bowser is supposed to be evil, and look at him.
I know she's not really my mama.
Yo, mama!
Nothing prepares you for Gygas though. The fucking Antichrist. It's one of the most iconic video game bosses of all time, and for good reason. It's so out of place. It's like watching a bunch of children movies and then suddenly hardcore gore starts playing. The lead up to Gygas is disturbing, what with the intestines and music. Porky shows up and finally you get to beat his ass. And I honestly did not expect metal music to play here. It is amazing. This fight was actually pretty stressful for me too, since I had very few items. I really had to be careful here and be smart on what moves I used. And this is the final boss, folks. I hope you understand why I love Gygas so much. My favorite boss across any game of this list, no doubt. I'm glad I didn't play this game when I was a kid. Although, most of the fight is scripted once you pray with Paula, it's still terrifying. You cannot grasp the true form of Gygas' attack. Yeah, no shit, what the fuck am I even fighting? Gygas will call out your name and claim that he's in pain. It makes it all the more disturbing. Eventually though, we call upon the people of the Earth and throw a giant spirit bomb and bada boom bada bing, Gaius is gone. This game's credits features the photos of your party that have been taken throughout the game, as well as playing this game's main theme. This game is perhaps the most satisfying to complete that I've experienced in a while. All of that pain to hear this music and this photo reel is worth it. And I think this moment specifically is what inspired so many story-based Earthbound-inspired games. Earthbound may not have much of a story, but it's really about the adventure, isn't it? You know, I went into Earthbound with the same mindset as I did with Dragon Ball Z. I knew it was a classic that inspired many pieces of media to follow, and I reached a similar conclusion with Earthbound. Is Earthbound's story the best? No, but that's not what it's trying to do. Are Earthbound's visuals the best? No, but they are solid. Is Earthbound's gameplay the best? It has its problems, but it does get fun. Overall, I find Earthbound to be very solid. I'll admit, it can be quite subjective, and I won't complain if you rank this game lower for its issues, but I really enjoyed it and respect it a lot. Games like Undertale and Lisa are good, yes, but Earthbound has a charm that's unmatched and overall game that I find to be enjoyable, and for as emotional as these games are, Gaius is something else. I love fighting the enemies at the end of Earthbound, I love exploring its world, Earthbound is just good. I can talk about this game for much longer, and Earthbound features many nuanced topics that it is well known for. If you want a more in-depth experience, then by all means, play it or watch a more detailed review. However, I think I talked about everything I needed to. Earthbound is number 3 on this list.
Number 2.
Mother 3 is the third and final installment in the Mother franchise. It was released in 2006 in Japan for the Game Boy Advance, and to this day, it has seen no official outside release.
Come on, Reggie, give us Mother 3! How about this instead?
The version I'm playing then is the fan translation, which includes swearing, always a plus. I honestly don't understand why Mother fans want Nintendo to release this game so much. It's already translated into English, and you can play it for free. Mother 3 is beloved amongst its fans, and I want to do this game justice. I really do recommend everyone to play this game for themselves. I know this game is so much more of an Earthbound successor, but given that they are in the same franchise, and this video has me rank and compare Earthbound-inspired games, I will be comparing the two a lot. Like Earthbound, you inhabit a wacky world with psychic abilities, and you must defeat a great evil. This is pretty much where the similarities end though, and I seriously cannot stress it enough. These games are very different, and it surprised me just how much so. For one thing, while Earthbound's story was very basic, Mother 3 goes all in on its story. The way the story is presented kinda reminds me of Bowser Inside's story, where you switch perspectives every now and then and have different interactions with the same villain. And I'm not complaining, that game is great. You play as a variety of characters. You have the main protagonist Lucas, his father Flint, his dog Boney, the thief Duster, the princess Kumatora, and a monkey, Salsa. And these are just the playable characters, this isn't even mention the supporting cast. Lucas's mother Hinawa, the totally not controversial masterpiece.
Are you trying to have sex with me?
Lucas's brother Klaus, and plenty others. Also, Klaus and Lucas have different hair colors from each other and their parents? This is some anime level of stupidity.
Think of a big black man chasing you!
Mother 3 goes out of its way to make its world seem very real. All games here do this through NPC interactions and overall world building, however Mother 3 takes us to the next level. The game is told in chapters, and NPC dialogue will continuously change throughout the game. Although backtracking is never necessary, there is a lot to uncover from doing so, and it speaks to just how much content this game actually has. And this is a portable game for fuck's sake. Not only do you not need to play Earthbound to understand this game, I'd argue that Mother 3 barely even feels like it's in the same series. You have some references to Earthbound here and there, most notably with the film theater and museum at the end of the game, but due to differences in presentation, the two games feel very different. If you're looking for a game with the same charm as Earthbound, forget about it. Mother 3 isn't that, but it makes up for it in story and gameplay. The game's visuals are getting great. All characters are easily recognizable and pop out well as they should. However, this game has far less psychedelic imagery than Earthbound. Overall, I do think Earthbound's visuals are better. I get this is really subjective, but if you look at the museum at the end of the game, where sprites are ripped straight from Earthbound, it's a night and day difference. Earthbound's sprites are simply more detailed. I also just like Earthbound's backgrounds and PSI effects far more. Mother 3's soundtrack is also very solid. It does repeat quite a few tracks, but never to the same level of annoyance as Earthbound or Lisa. What tracks do play a lot, I consistently enjoy. This game has great battle music. Also, since this game leans heavily into its story, you'll be greeted by some great tracks that perfectly encapsulate the mood of the game at its most emotional moments. Overall though, it's still a very fun and upbeat soundtrack. Before I talk about this game's story, I need to talk at length about its gameplay. I have a lot of things that I like about it and a lot of things I don't like about it. First things first, Mother 3 has some very noticeable quality of life improvements. The menu system is much more forgiving, and getting a game over late game is no longer a death sentence. There are far less interruptions, and most importantly of all, the dungeons don't make me want to kill myself. In this game you actually have the ability to sprint, which means you can avoid enemies for change. Not only that, but they don't constantly spawn off screen, so clearing a room is actually a possibility. The highlight of this game's gameplay are easily the boss battles. They are by far the most thorough of any game listed. I talked during an Earthbound segment, but I thought Earthbound's late game fights were actually interesting due to the level of strategy involved. However, this game takes that and applies it to the entire game. This game's bosses are significantly harder than Earthbound's. This is not a game where you can simply spam your strongest attack and win, unless you have PK ground, but I never unlocked that. Every boss has a large sum of HP and no easy weaknesses. You just have to wear them down. In most RPGs, I rarely use debuffs since it's simply not necessary, but not in this game. You're going to be using them from the first boss fight up until the end. Like Earthbound, this game has a rolling HP mechanic, so some fights will have a level of urgency as you rush to heal whatever party member has just died. Each party member has a different purpose. It's not as dynamic or thought out as some other RPGs, but it's still a nice touch. Duster, for instance, has little in the way of actual attacks, but a whole arsenal of debuffs. The best example of Mother 3's boss fights though, is the first fight of the Masked Man. Fuck you! By this point you've defeated the Barrier Trio, one of the most difficult fights in the game, so you're ready to face him. He is the tankiest boss thus far, and he will throw everything in the book at you, testing you on everything you've done up until this point. He uses PSI attacks that attack all your party members, so you have to set up shields, except he destroys their shields, so you have to keep putting them back up. You have to debuff him significantly since his normal attacks do a ludicrous amount of damage. Combine that with the fact that he also uses lightning attacks, which only Lucas can avoid, and you have a fight in which the boss is constantly applying pressure to you. You have to strike a perfect balance between healing, defending, and attacking in order to win. I beat this boss my first try, but I didn't find it a cakewalk at all. I was completely exhausted out of all my items by the end of it, and was very close to losing. It's a great challenge, but not frustratingly so where it throws bullshit at you. Everything he does you have a counter for, you just have to be smart about when to use it. I know some people think RPGs are boring, but with fights like these, I'm sorry about you hate using your brain. I should also mention that you can time your attacks to the beat of the music to apply combos. I'm not too good at this, especially since I use an emulator, but it adds a level of depth to the game for the sake of fun. It's not necessary at all to learn, but it is pretty cool. Overall, Mother 3's combat system is the best of the game here, and it really shows. It's thorough, dynamic, and you have to be smart about it. The game even allows you to practice fights, which is extremely nice. I had a lot of fun with this game's combat. So the gameplay is perfect, right? Yeah, fuck off. I know people will hate me for saying this, but good god, this game's balancing is terrible, especially in an early game. I have played each and every one of these games the exact same when it came to random encounters, avoided no enemies, and somehow I still found myself to be severely underleveled. This game was pretty difficult, but by the time I reached the Barrier Trio, I just completely buckled. I had to grind for over an hour to get up to speed. Why? This nearly ruined the game for me, and as much as I enjoyed this game's fights and story, I also thought the encounters I constantly got were bullshit. This game might not bombard you with the enemies like Earthbound did, but at times it's not much better. Maybe you'll get to heal before a boss fight, but maybe you won't, as is the case of the first Facade fight. Oh, and unlike Earthbound, enemies don't run away after you complete a dungeon, so have fun fighting your way back. And before you call me out for being bad at the game or something, this isn't an isolated case. As painful as Earthbound is, you are in complete denial if you think Mother 3 is somehow easier. Case in point, this fucking guy. You know your game is unbalanced when the only response people give is, just grind bro. This game's leveling should have been much smoother, that's all I'm saying. It gets very bad at times. The walkthrough I fucking watched for some parts suddenly started grinding out of the blue. Boy, what a fun game! The game does have some nice changes of pace though. In Earthbound, I find it annoying how sometimes I just wanted to read text and not get interrupted by enemies from time to time, but Mother 3 doesn't do that. During the game you enter the Chimera Lab, and you are tasked with looking for two monkeys, that being Salso and his girlfriend. Apart from reusing previous characters, which is nice, the game allows you to learn about the chimeras that you've encountered this far. It's a nice relaxing moment until you meet this fucker, the Ultimate Chimera. I love this part of the game. If you fight this thing, insta game over. What you instead have to do is carefully navigate across the facility and hope to God you don't encounter this thing. And no other games here really have a moment like this, and this was a big highlight of the game for me. There's also another moment where you have to work in a factory for a brief bit, and then have to watch a show to reunite your party members. And I really like how it subtly develops this game's world and characters, while not forcing me to do a random encounter after random encounter. I mentioned earlier that this game has plenty of additional content. In Way of This, there are a few optional bosses you can choose. It's not much, but it's still a step up over Earthbound, and some other games here. My only problem with them is that I had no idea some of them existed. Lord Passion in particular, and wait, never mind. I don't know, maybe I just skipped a piece of dialogue or something. This game's story is what gets the most praise though. Some even consider it a masterpiece. Do I think so? Maybe, but I did enjoy it. I do think this game's worth experiencing for yourself, especially since it's technically free. It's a little over 20 hours long, so it's quite the game. The spoilers begin now. After a cute intro sequence which introduces us to Lucas and his family, we play as Lucas' father, Flint, tasked with stopping a forest fire. We see that strange people in pig masks are intentionally starting a fire, which sets up one of the game's biggest questions going on. Who are these guys? The whole first chapter in general does a good job at introducing the supporting cast and minor characters, as well as this game's first big plot revelation. Flint's wife, i.e. Lucas' mother, has been killed. I really like this moment where Flint lashes out in a rage and has to be taken out. I didn't expect this amount of maturity from a Nintendo game. For whatever reason, when you play as a character, they are curiously silent, but when you're not playing as them, they speak. I honestly have no idea as to why this was done. In the first few chapters, we play as everybody but Lucas. We are introduced to Duster and his family dynamic, Kumatora, more on her later, and the aforementioned Salsa. My favorite character though has to be this guy, Facade, resident and certified monkey hater.
You stupid fucking monkey.
He's a recurring villain that seems to be a big perpetrator of the Pigmask army. He sells himself as a genuine and kind person, but behind the scenes, he's a selfish asshole who constantly tries to stop you. I also really enjoy the review at the end as to who he truly was. It's only at chapter 4 do we play as Lucas proper. Before this, everything has been set up as means of context. One of my favorite ways the game does this is during chapter 2, we meet Facade and Salsa from Duster's perspective, and in chapter 3, it's the other way around. This brings me to a big gripe I have with Mother 3's story. Its pacing is
capable of improvement.
What is Mother 3's story, you may ask? Well, there's a sleeping dragon beneath the islands where the game takes place in. The dragon is said to have the power to reshape the world, and will inherit the power of the one which awakens it. There are 7 needles scattered across the islands which keep it sealed. What an interesting plot point. When is this revealed? At the halfway mark. The fucking halfway mark, why not earlier? I get that the first half of the story provides context to these characters, and that's great, but the other half are rushing between needles left and right, with very little space in between. There's hardly a break and it all seems too fast for my liking. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but I see no reason as to why this wasn't introduced to us at the beginning. Yes, technically it was alluded to, as well as other things going forward such as the Egg of Light, but I find the first half of the game to strangely have little sense of direction. We swap characters constantly, learn about a problem of the world, such as lightning striking the town, and fix the problem. It's not bad writing, a lot is introduced here, but I just find it to be a weird decision. In the early game, it's introduced to us that the big motivator for Lucas is that he wants to grow stronger, but why is this exactly? Okay, so Klaus goes missing and his mother is dead, I get that. I always took the reason as being that he was so devastated by this, he wanted to protect the ones he loved, hence his brave stand against Facade at the end of chapter 3. But why exactly are Lucas and his friends going on a world tour to stop the Pigmasks? With Ness, he didn't really need an explanation, he's the chosen one. And the game doesn't take itself too seriously, but Mother 3 does take itself seriously, and Lucas is also the chosen one. Perhaps this is just poorly worded of me, but I find Lucas' character to be quite weak for how emotional Mother 3 is supposed to be. The game treats him as this initially pampered and weak boy who grows strong, but what does this have to do with the Pigmasks? In chapter 1 we meet Mecha Draco, the thing responsible for Lucas' mother's death and a product of the Pigmasks. The problem is that Lucas is fucking absent for the entirety of the prologue. Lucas wants to grow stronger, sure, but fighting an evil and coping with the loss of a loved one are two different plot points and should be treated as such. Honestly, you can dismiss my complaints about Lucas, but beyond this point, Lucas' personality is scarcely explored beyond his grief for his mother, which I will touch upon later. At the beginning of chapter 4, we see just how much Tasmania has changed. It's no longer a small town like in the first few chapters. It's much more suburban now. And boy, this game has some obvious commentary on modern life, that's for sure. This is where the game actually starts to open up, and I really like how you can explore the town and see just how much everything has changed. Mother3's supporting cast is a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion. On the plus end, you have Duster. He's faced with a caring and outwardly scolding father for everything he does, and has to put his skills to the test for the betterment of his town. Later on, he develops amnesia and has to remember who he is. Upon remembering, he joins Lucas on his quest. It's a small yet good arc that shows the good work of Duster's character and his commitment to his friends. On the flip side, you have Kumatora. For as much as I like her, what does she do exactly? She's introduced in Chapter 2, gets split up a couple times, and just magically reappears when the time comes to pull the needles. I thought her character had a lot of potential, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and I have no idea why she's constantly following Lucas apart from she is a good person and she wants to stop evil. I bring this all up not because I want to shit on Murphy's characters, I do enjoy them and are well written, but I think even games like Undertale do this better, despite their shorter runtime. Okay, this is where the spoilers really begin, and this is the part what everyone remembers the game for. In Chapter 1, Klaus tries to fight the Drago that killed his mother, and he gets clapped. From this point on, he's missing and completely absent from the story, and I do mean completely. He is mentioned a few times, especially by Flint, whose life has now become a mundane routine of visiting his wife's grave and looking for his missing son, but apart from that, he's gone. I know Mother3's ending is really beloved, and for good reason, but this is a huge problem that I have. Throughout the game, we are gifted with scenes reminiscing over his mother, and you can visit her grave whenever you want throughout the story. There's the scene that I love. During Chapter 4, before you leave with Lucas, he has a flashback of his mother telling him to get rest. Show don't tell that Lucas misses his mother. It's short, but it was a huge highlight of the game for me. And don't even get me started over the Sunflower Fields chapter. But with Klaus? This is this dude's brother, and there isn't one goddamn scene where Lucas asks, "Gee, I wonder where my brother went." I really don't understand why Klaus gets so little attention for how important he is supposed to be. This game should be reminding me that he's missing, and Lucas misses him, or perhaps even feels responsible for it. Around the same time we are introduced to the Seven Needles, we meet the Masked Man, a main antagonist going forward. He's the only person apart from Lucas who can pull the needles, and there are some very cool confrontations with him. I wondered who can be It's Klaus. It's fucking Klaus, who else could it be, seriously. Before I go any further about Klaus, allow me to touch upon Porky for a moment, this game's main antagonist. He's the one responsible for everything, yet he gets so little screen time. This is what I mean about Mother3's pacing. Porky is the big bad, but he's only even really mentioned towards the end of the game, let alone the amount of time we see him. This extends to the final area of the game too, New Pork City. It's supposed to be the big city, yet it's pretty short and has less content than Tazmily, which is supposed to be a small town. What scenes we do have with him, I really adore. He's by far the most thorough character in the Mother series, and his transformation from Ness's friend at the beginning of Earthbound to this decrepit and tragic character we see in Mother3 is stunning. I love how it's shown, albeit never stated, that Porky is still fond of Ness and still the same kid that we knew him as. He just wants a world where he's accepted, and his choice at the end of the game to permanently seal himself off really fits his character well. I just wish we saw more of him.
Drake? What? Where's the door hole?
So this game's ending, is it as good as people say? I'd argue yes, although I'm sorry I may not enjoy it as much as other people did. I did tear up a bit though, I will admit. We finally face down with the Masked Man, and here it is revealed explicitly that it is Klaus, in case you didn't figure it out by now. What follows is a really emotional sequence where Klaus, trying to kill Lucas, gradually remembers the person he once was before becoming a human chimera. The cutscenes with Hinawa and the music are the icing on the cake here. I especially like how Flint tries to stop his sons from fighting, but there's little he can do. I do wish we saw more of him too though. Klaus finally snaps out of it and ends his own life in front of you. So it's a good reunion. Despite the complaints I have, I'd say Mother3's ending is still incredibly satisfying and beautifully written. I see why people love it so much. Still not my favorite boss here, that goes to Gygas, but if you say this is your favorite, I will not complain. This is the moment that really defines Mother3 as a game. Mother3 easily earns its spot up high up on this list. I went into this game with high expectations and I was still impressed. For the better gameplay and story, I have to put it above Earthbound, and I think it's just more thorough than Lisa and Undertale ever were, or any game below for that matter. This is the game that takes its time. Yes, the games below are great, but Mother3 edges the gap. Its music is amazing, its gameplay is amazing, its story is amazing, and for all my critique of it, this game doesn't have any major flaws. I do think it deserves the S tier rank. I don't think it's miles ahead of the games below it, but Mother3 has an unbelievable good reputation, and one that is well deserved. Mother 3 is number 2, so what game could be above it? It was always going to be Omori. Omori is the game that convinced me to play all these similar games, as well as obtain the idea to create this video. Honestly, this video is just one elaborate excuse to talk about this game. I will be the first to admit that I have a rather strong bias to this game, but I don't think it's without merit. I did want to be completely honest with my opinion here, and some of the other games I've played on this list are really good, but Omori still wins. I'll of course go more in depth in just a second, but the short answer is in terms of gameplay, art, and music, Omori is a top contender for sure, but that alone wouldn't be enough for me to put it above Mother 3. Its story though, Omori stomps. Omori wins, and it's not even a fucking contest, it's that one-sided. Allow me to put this into perspective for a moment. Steam is an enormous software distribution platform, and the Steam library hosts thousands of different games. Some of the top rated games of all time on Steam are genuine masterpieces, and they have all one thing in common. They are super fucking fun. Each one of these games have innovative and or addictive gameplay, except for People Playground, that game would just murder people. Now here's Omori. It's a somewhat obscure indie RPG maker game, one that was released in Christmas 2020, so not that long ago as of writing. Omori started as a comic way back in 2011, now referred to as Omori Boy. I'm Omori and I fab and play old games. I promise you he has changed a lot. Through Omori's long development cycle and disastrous Kickstarter, Omori has clearly changed a lot since its inception, though the old Omori is still very intriguing. Anyway, back to the final game. I enjoyed its gameplay, but I don't think anyone will argue that it's revolutionary. It's just an RPG Maker game, and yet Omori is within the top 20 games of all time. I can promise you with absolute certainty it's because of this game's story. I have quite a number of friends who have played this game, either before or after me, and all of them have praised it, and some even consider it to be their favorite game of all time. I personally wouldn't call it my favorite game, but I would say its story is my favorite in any video game ever, and quite frankly it's not even close. This game is art. I don't care if I come across as an annoying fanboy with this one. This game deserves praise, and damn right I'm going to give it. I realize this game is not for everyone, and that's fine, but this is my goddamn video, and we review indie RPGs in this household. This game is an experience. No amount of me explaining or analyzing this game will serve it justice. You have to play it for yourself. Video games are not film. Even if you know what happens, everybody's experience of a video game is different. The challenge then is how do I explain what makes Omori good, and trust me, this was the most difficult game to write a script for. As per usual by now, I will go over the non-story elements first. Actually, I am going to be intentionally vague with the story for the time being. Let's start out with this game's artwork. Omokat's hand-drawn art is really beautiful, and I love the pencil crayon style aesthetic that this game has. Omori's cutscenes, although brief and sparse, are amazing. If the entire game was like this, I would say that this game has the best visuals here, but it's not. Most of the game is in sprite work, and I think it's pretty good, not the best, but solid. The game is very colorful in pretty much all areas. It's supposed to be cute, which makes it all the more apparent when the game strips areas of their color and detail. I really enjoy the character designs, they're cutely recognizable, although I can't really say they're the best though, far from it. Everybody has same face syndrome and swap the clothing and their hairstyles, and the characters are practically indistinguishable from one another. It's not a huge deal, but Omori's characters, apart from Omori himself arguably, wouldn't really stand out next to other pieces of media. There are some exceptions to this, like Space's ex-boyfriends, but he is the exception and not the rule. There are also some minor problems that have weird coloring inconsistencies, but that's neither here nor there. This game's music is fantastic, although outclassed by Undertale by sheer quality. In terms of enhancing this game's overall feel, which, may I remind you, is the main objective of any soundtrack, I'd actually say Omori's soundtrack is the best on this list. A friend told me that they wouldn't have enjoyed this game as much as they did were it not for the soundtrack, and I couldn't agree more. It hard carries this game and really demonstrates how important a soundtrack is for when telling a visual story. But if you're looking for bangers, well, Omori has those too. Lastly, this game's gameplay. I think it's pretty good. I do have some complaints though, and they're not insignificant either. Let's start with the good. Omori's battle system is really fun. It's nothing like the depth of Mother 3 or Earthbound has, or the customizability of Lisa, but this battle system was the single reason why I chose to replay this game in the first place. Instead of stats effects, each party member and foe has 5 different emotional states that can be inflicted. Neutral, angry, sad, happy, and afraid. All these have their buffs and debuffs. Additionally, it acts as a rock, paper, scissors system. Angry beats sad, beats happy, beats angry. It's a really simple mechanic, but it offers a lot of fun. Initially, it's not too useful. Omori shares the same problems as other RPGs about being used your strongest attack all the time, but at least you do have to use the system rather than ignore it, such as the case of ops elements. The best use of the system comes by way of Sweetheart though, the second boss fight. Not only is her theme the best in the game, but she locks herself into being happy and will make your entire party angry with no way of avoiding it. What results is a really engaging boss fight where you constantly have to make yourself sad to avoid taking unnecessary damage. I would say challenging, and if you're underleveled it is, but leveling in Omori is very easy. Speaking of difficulty, overall I'd say Omori is pretty easy. Not off levels of easy, but it is still pretty easy. I never saw this as a problem for myself, since it never felt insultingly easy, but if you're looking for a challenge then Omori isn't the game for you. That's not to suggest there aren't challenging fights in this game, there are, but most are optional ones. Kite Kid, Hooligans, or Psychopath, and especially Perfect Heart, this game's super boss, can definitely give you a run for your money. You have to be absolutely prepared and competent when fighting her. That's why I can't really criticize this game for its low difficulty. There does exist a challenge, and with the new console release even more so, but you have to go out of your way to find them. Like many other games on this list, Omori features puzzles. They're few and far between though, the ones in Humphrey are challenging enough I'd say, but it's no one-shot. This game also has a tag system. Each party member has a specific action they can perform in making them the party leader, and the tag poses are super cute. Although it's a pretty novel idea, it only comes up to use now and then, and there's no puzzle that genuinely challenges it. Faraway Town is the exception to all of this though. Although this area features little in the combat apart from a Psychopath, a secret boss, the minigames here are great. There are no enemies here to farm money, and so you have to do jobs. You can tutor math, kill flies at the superstore, or my personal favorite, deliver pizza. The challenge in the pizza game is that you decipher this fucking shitty handwriting each time you do this, and it's hilarious. There's so much you can do in this town, some things you can only do at a certain part of the story. Speaking of that, this game is huge! It's about 20 hours long, and that's without doing all the extra stuff, mind you. It has an insane amount of content, and I have no idea how some people discovered this shit by themselves. Not only are there plenty of secrets to uncover, I'm still learning new things about this game, but this game offers a fuck ton of additional content. There's optional quests, optional areas, different choices for a boss, etc. In addition to serving multiple endings, this game also has 2 main routes. Each route has unique bosses, areas, and overall, a bunch of stuff to explore. I could go on about this, but I really don't understand why some people say this is the replayable game. It is. There's one gripe I have though. Some areas drag out for way too fucking long. This is my opinion, and I know some people didn't feel this way at all, but Sweetheart's Castle and this fucking guy were really annoying to go through. I mentioned the downtime problem earlier of a story not happening in between gameplay, and Omori suffers from this quite a bit. More about it later though. Overall, I think the gameplay is quite good, especially with all the exploration and extra content. It has its faults, sure, but nothing I would say is actually bad. It's fun. One last thing to talk about, and this is important. If you look at the game's Steam page, you might have noticed this game is tagged as psychological horror. Now Omori is not a horror game by any means, don't get the wrong idea, but That warning is not just for show. This game does not fuck around, and for as lighthearted and cute as this game usually is, this game takes itself very seriously, and you probably won't enjoy the game if you can't take it seriously either. Every time you boot up the game, you're greeted with this cheerful message. Normally I brush off these warnings as this is a fucking 2D sprite game for fuck's sake, but no, this game is serious. This game covers some really fucked up and disturbing shit. I wouldn't call this game scary, but yes, too disturbing. If you're uncomfortable with this sort of stuff, don't play this game. Except for this fucking scene, which was added in the Switch version. This actually scared me. Jesus Christ. This game got an M rating, and it's not because of its gore, sex, or swearing, no, Humphrey doesn't count. It's because the game is that fucked up, which really speaks as to how well this game tells a story to make you feel that way. For the sake of convenience, I will talk about this game's horror when talking about this game's story, but just know that the horror aspect is one of this game's strongest suits, and it would not be the same without it. Normally, I don't think spoilers truly matter, and I still hold that opinion, but I do feel like this game is best experienced completely blind. Play the game now and fuck it. If you come this far, you're going to continue watching, aren't you? If there's nothing I can do to convince you, let's get this ball rolling. This is going to be long. If not though, skip the credits. Now I promised earlier in the video I wouldn't analyze the game's story in depth, and I'm still sticking with to that, but with Omori I have to do some parts sequentially. I want to explain why Omori's story is so good. Keyword is why. And for that, I have to walk you through how I felt when I played this game blind. After thinking about this conundrum for a while, I think I've isolated Omori's success to two main things: presentation and build-up. Let's start with presentation. Okay, so Omori vs Lisa. To people who have played both games, I think it's fair to say that Lisa has the most fucked up and sad moments out of any story here. Yet Omori, despite not having those same plot elements, is way more emotionally impactful. And if you disagree, well, sorry, you are in the minority here. So why is this? It's because Omori's story is presented in one of the most brilliant ways I have ever seen. Presentation defines, well, how a story is presented. In many ways, Omori is the anti-Yiik. Whereas Yiik went out of its way to fucking explain to you the story verbatim, Omori is very cryptic and does not reveal its cards until the very end. But Omori does reveal them, and that's the key factor here. There are so many games of cryptic storytelling that many secrets uncover, yet never fully explain everything. Omori is not like that. There are story analysis videos for this game, but I promise you that you do not need to watch them. You will understand everything by the time you end this game, and most of it is just through visual storytelling. Omori follows show don't tell as if it were religious scripture, and we will see that as we go on, but let's just begin already. Omori begins in white space, a place you've been living in for as long as you can remember. There's not much to do in white space other than walk around, so naturally you interact with everything. If you're like me, and you look at Omori's sketchbook and go, wow, this kid is a schizo, eventually you'll exit white space and meet up with all your friends. What the hell? I thought this was a depressing game. Why is everything so nice and cute? This feels like anything Omori could ever want. That's a big thing this game has over others. In every other game here, you meet your party members as you go along and develop ties with them. But in Omori, you have everyone right off the bat. They're all introduced to you within the first hour. Omori is not a game about making friendships, rather, it's a game about keeping them, and it goes over way more mature topics because of that. For a 20-hour long game, there are only really 6 characters that we care about, and each has a unique relationship with the main protagonist. The only 2 we should keep in mind for the sake of this review are Omori, Omori's sister, and Basil, Omori's best friend. In order to immediately get us comfortable with the main cast, we see Basil's photo album for the first time. Not enough people talk about how great of a narrative device the photo album is. Less than 20 minutes in, and we're already introduced to all these cute and fuzzy interactions with all the main characters. It's not just captions, we get to see the photos too. Throughout the game, all the party members will frequently talk and socialize with each other, and it feels natural. And most importantly, seeing the photo album now will prepare us for when we see it again later in the game. One thing that will stick out right away is Omori himself. Unlike his friends, which are all very colorful and expressive, Omori always has a straight face and is completely monochrome. Hell, he's the only party member who doesn't interact with others both in story and in fights. Now ask yourself why this is. After a somewhat long intro sequence, we are greeted with this cutscene. Yeah, by the way, there's no way out anymore, and this is where I, and many other players, got stuck. Your only option is to open the menu and, I kid you not, kill yourself. This is where the game really begins. You see a boy sleeping in his bed. What, you thought Omori was going to be the main character? This is Sunny. We listen to mom's phone and get some immediate context, but we haven't left our house in a long ass time. And now we are moving away. Kelly will be coming over. This is going to be my presentation. Keep note of the train of thought I had when playing this. Who is this boy? He looks like Omori, yet also different. Where are we anyway? Was that all just a dream? It should be, since Kel is apparently a real person. Why does Sunny refuse to enter certain areas of his house? What the fuck is that thing? Why are we scared? And this is where I should talk about this game's horror side. This game has perfect usage of tone. One of my favorite parts of Undertale and Deltarune was how the game would shift between super calm to super serious in a split second. Omori does this too, but to an nth degree. When Sunny is scared, the game becomes scary. When he's not, the game goes back to normal. Sunny being a silent protagonist works wonders in this game. To give a little teaser, this game's story is about remembering your past and overcoming your fears. Sunny does not know any more than the player does. Everything the player feels is manifested through Sunny, and this will become a lot more apparent as we go on. The horror fights are unlike the actual encounters. They are entirely within your head, and you have to use calming techniques in order to get rid of them. And best of all, just like real phobias, they don't always work. Full speed ahead. From this point on, we play between two distinct worlds, Headspace and Faraway Town. Headspace is Sunny's mind, whereas Faraway Town is the real world. Both serve as an exploration of Sunny's thoughts and feelings. Omori, above all else, is a character analysis of some of trauma. There are other characters, yes, and very important. I mean, who doesn't love Kel? But Sunny is the leading star here. He steals the show, and it never breaks from his perspective. I won't focus too much on Headspace, since it's not that important for me to talk about, but it is where you spend most of your time. Bezo is missing now. And you have to find him. There are lots of cute moments and character interactions that happen here. It's generally supposed to be a fun world. Every time you leave though, it's by means out of your control. The game establishes very vague ideas early on, only to forcefully wake you up again. The game will now count how many days left until you move away, and there's a lot to talk about in 3 days left. Prior to this, you would have gone to this event on the first night. Should you choose to open the door to Mari, you'll be greeted with this.
Hello, Ed boy!
Okay, just kidding, this is what it actually is. Ooh, scary. Now you have the same option but for Kel, but remember what happened last time? This is fucking genius. The game conditions you not knowing whether this is real or not, which is something that will be explored more in just a moment. But should you choose not to play chicken and open the door, you'll get... it's just him. Time to touch some grass. Remember what I just said about conditioning? Well, the game goes out of its way to remind you that you aren't living your dreams anymore. If you go off the road, Kel will pull you back. You can daydream a fight with the poster and Kel thinks you're tripping out. And lastly, we see this bitch. Yep, that's Aubrey. And what I really love is that there's no big character introduction. Her name is just said in passing, it's all so smooth. And wow, my first impression was no father figure, and later on that's what's revealed to be. You'll fight Aubrey and treat it like any other boss fight, except the fight abruptly ends when you attack Aubrey with a knife. Unfortunately this isn't Britain, so Aubrey runs off. I absolutely adore this moment since it masterfully contrasts fake and the real of this game. This isn't your dreams anymore, you actually just hurt someone. Throughout Faraway Town, you are greeted with hallucinations of Headspace NPCs and younger versions of your friends. One small complaint though, is that I wish your actions mattered more. There are choices in this game, but it's nothing like Lisa and Undertale. It will affect which ending you get, but all the choices are pretty obvious and common sense. Past this point, it doesn't matter if you lose any of the real world fights. Omori is all about continuously asking the player questions and gradually answering them. What happened to Aubrey? Where's Mari? The last question is answered fairly soon. She's dead. However, the exact specifics of her death are unknown as of yet. And by the way, you don't just talk no jutsu to Aubrey to become your friend again. You fight her 3 fucking times, and by the end of it, you're just convinced she's a total bitch. It's only when Hiro shows up does the gang truly reunite. Mari's death is the biggest driving force in the story. It explains why Sunny, as well as everybody else, went their own ways. I don't really care to regurgitate the entirety of Omori's plot to you, but all you need to know is this image. If you know, you know. Then there's Basil. He's been bullied by Aubrey and her gang, and their initial objective is to reclaim his photo album. He seems extremely scared for whatever reason, and the bathroom scene just begs of what the fuck is going on. And when you get back home, god fucking damn it. And finally, the photo album. Now it's seen in full color and detail, although some photos are curiously missing. I am not exaggerating, but it single-handedly made me appreciate and like the characters 10 times more. Everything is so sweet and makes you wonder what went wrong. What went wrong? So, let's talk about build-up now, and Omori does this masterfully. Throughout Headspace, you gather keyword letter keys to play Hangman with. It's more of a fun gimmick than anything else, however it does slowly ask of you what exactly it is you're doing. Try as you might, you'll never find Basil. There are no leads as to where he could be, and you are distracted over and over and over again. By the last dungeon, your friends have even completely forgotten who he even is. It's just the little things that get me. There's so much attention to detail in this game. Take Whitespace, the game's first area. Does it remind you of anything? The song will also change throughout the game from this to this. And finally, perfectly magic of Mari's piano. Omori's full of symbolism at every corner, and if you're a big fan of symbolism and storytelling, by all means, pop off. Remember how in Lisa the game constantly reminds you about Lisa's death? Well, Omori does this as well, but to even a greater extent. Everything ultimately relates back to Mari in some way, and she is a constant talking point. A common critique of this game is that most of the story only progresses in the real world, and the dream world only serves as padding. This is true to the extent that, yes, most of the story does occur in the real world, however not only is this blatantly wrong towards the final third of the game, but it also ignores what the dream world is for. It's to establish context for these characters, a reason to care about them, and a way to provide contrast to how they once were and how they actually behave now. And to me, that's smart writing. To sum up events, Basil nearly dies, Hero comes back, and you make up with Aubrey, and try to make up things with Basil. While all this is going on, you gradually rediscover more and more of your memories. Again, the contrast is beautiful, and it truly feels like everything is becoming nice again. Upon reuniting with everybody and confronting all three of your major fears, you'll think you got the story all figured out. Mari committed suicide, Sunny was traumatized, and the group split apart. And in case you didn't get the memo already, it is here where we see the missing photos of Mari just prior to her death. Reading through the photo album one last time, and given how long the game has been up until this point, it all feels really satisfying to get everyone back together again. However, this doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why Basil is so terrified of you, nor does it explain what this thing is. Time to address this something in the room. Throughout Headspace as well as the real world, this thing constantly shows up. You can conquer all your fears, but this thing stays. It will taunt you throughout the game, even when you don't expect it to. Over and over and over again will this thing appear. And unlike Sunny's other spheres, nothing seems to indicate as to what this thing might be. The game has been showing a multitude of cutscenes, and it's clear that Basil and Sunny have some sort of special connection that is yet to be explored. And lastly, there's Omori himself, Sunny's alter ego. Why is he different? Sunny will progressively get more comfortable with the areas of his house he has refused to visit before, but they all relate to Mari in some way or another. The game has also been gradually building up Sunny's relationship with his friends. Beyond just the character interactions in the photo album, you also get to read about his happy memories of them that, for whatever reason, have been forgotten. You'll sometimes see the photo album scribbled out, a violin, music sheets everywhere, among others. Omori is a very wordy game, but unlike Yiik, it does it well, and it knows when to talk and knows when not to. And there are some scenes where the game refuses to elaborate for the sake of impact, such as this. Enter Black Space, the answer to the Hangman keys, and my favorite part of the game. This is the Yume Nikki part of the game. There's doors and creepy rooms, the difference is that Black Space is far more linear and much creepier. This is the first room. Mari's death is most apparent here, but she is not the caring figure she's usually portrayed as, rather it's something far more tragic. I think John's awesome reaction accurately describes how I felt in this part of the game.
Like legitimately, how bad could it have been? Like what happened?
And of course I have to talk about this scene, one of the highlights of the game. In order to get out you need a key. You can get one but there's still no exit. Ultimately you are forced to kill Miwo, your cat, in this really drawn out sequence. But even that doesn't do anything. It's only later revealed you have to stab yourself to get out, which you could have done from the beginning. Suicide is the only way out. Anyway, as luck would have it, you do find Basil. And kill him. and kill him again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and every time before he is killed, Basil is trying to tell Omori something. In this amazing cutscene, where we still don't know who the fuck Omori is supposed to be, or what he represents. Finale time. One last spoiler warning. Everybody's back together and promise that this time they will stick together no matter what happens. The game has been heavily implying that both Sunny and Basil are suicidal though, and now that we're all at Basil's house, anything can go down. The truth is something that gets constantly mentioned, especially in Black Space. We also see this creepy fucking scene. But now that we've come this far, it's time to see what the truth actually is. This is where the game takes off its gloves and stops fucking around. Here's the big reveal that explains everything. We re-enter Sunny's mind for the first time, and we aren't playing as Omori. And it's time to confront the thing that has been behind us this entire time. Immediately the tone is different. It's extremely dark, and there's very little dialogue for the entire sequence. This is the final photo album we come across, except it's nothing like before. Despite the fact that this all took place during the day, all the photos are darkened in grayscale. The photos are out of order, so you literally have to piece the story together. In the game files, there exist captions for these photos, however in the final game, there are no captions. While the captions are good if you want a more thorough picture of what happened, it demonstrates to me an appreciation of detail. This entire sequence is significantly better without the captions. Going into this game blind, the truth is a huge shocker, but out of sheer curiosity, you push forward. It's all very creepy and incredibly disturbing, and the music plays very well into this. It goes from super soft to super loud very quickly, and it's meant to be uneasy. The game will use music to create dramatic effect when obtaining the photos, but it shifts to be complete silence when obtaining some others. What results is a masterpiece of a sequence that explains everything you need to know, and without it coming across as unearned. I've talked about some poor plot twists before here, but this is one that makes sense, as any plot shit should. Breathe new life into the story. There has been some minor foreshadowing, but the biggest context is the build up that something is off. Omori is a puzzle, and the truth is the missing piece. Throughout the game we learn the recital, Omori's piano and Sunny's violin. In case you haven't figured it out by now, Sunny got frustrated over the recital and broke his violin. An argument broke out, and in a moment of uncalculated anger, she is pushed down the stairs. Keyword, pushed. It is your fault. Basil, in his infinite wisdom, suggests the idea of hanging her body to frame it as a suicide to avoid any sort of blame. The sequence is absolutely flawless. There are some complaints I've heard, but they seem completely idiotic to me. My only real regret that I have is for whatever reason, the photos are taken from Basil's perspective, even though it's Sunny's memory. I know this plays into the photo album theme and Basil is supposed to be Sunny's accomplice, but it's still weird. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. That is how it's fucking done! Now that the game is no longer dancing around the big reveal, it actually takes time to explain shit. It is revealed that Sunny scribbled out the photos, not Basil, which was established previously, and locked himself out for 4 years due to this. Taking all the blame, Basil has practically gone insane, and is now trying to fucking kill you in a futile effort to prevent you from abandoning him a second time. Holy shit. What comes next is a research into everything the game has been trying to tell to the player. We use a toy box key from earlier to discover what's in it, a door that has been missing from view because we legitimately refuse to see it. It's the violin. Remember the photo album that we see time and time again? Well, it's time to revisit it once more, except this time, we see it as a full scene. We know for a fact that Sunny misses his sister so much and blames himself for it. Everything is shown how he suffers, and that's what makes Omori so disturbing. Everything is so fucking well built up and established that the only thing I want at this point is his kid to be happy. Maybe we broke our friend's trust by lying to them and breaking their gift to us, but it's never too late to reconcile. And Sunny breaks down. While I don't enjoy it as much as Yiik, Omori's a close second as the final boss, and Omori's finale overall is by far the strongest in this list, no contest. Now if you told me a game about mental illness has yourself as the final boss, I'd go, of course, that makes sense. But playing Fruit, I wasn't really sure what Sunny was afraid of to begin with, but Omori feels fucking earned. This is the character you've played as for most of the game, and you have to face him down. A product of your own self-guilt and hatred, manifested into this final showdown. Omori is the manifestation of your own escapism and desire to remain childish for neglecting the fact that you lied. It's extremely poetic, even if the fight itself is pretty simple. This is where the game uses dialogue to its greatest effect, to reinforce the narrative when it matters. Omori will scold you and belittle you for your mistakes, and it fucking hurts, dude. Off does this too, but it lacks the same impact, but in Omori we've been following a 20-hour-long journey of this kid's inner minds and thoughts. Now, I don't care what this emo fuck said about me, but even I can see the shit has a weight to it, and some people just straight up not show what he says because it's that hurtful.
Stop saying that, Omori.
Kill yourself!
And if a game can do that good of a job of making its word reach out that far into the audience, you know the writing is amazing, because it is. So let's just beat this shit in, right? Alright. This game has a mechanic called Omori Did Not Succumb, preventing Omori from getting killed one time and preventing a game over. And now you have to fight against it. And he doesn't go down. It gets stronger and stronger as the fight grows more and more disturbing and corrupted.
I'm killing you. I'm killing you.
At the same time though, the only way to win is to remember the encouraging words of your friends, the prospect of a better future, and to not give up. What, you thought I was actually going to show you the cutscene? Play the game for that, or watch it on YouTube if you really want, but trust me when I say it loses all of its meaning if you haven't played the game before. This is how a story properly builds itself up to its climax, and this is also where most of the players of this game said they tried at. It's fucking fantastic, 10 out of 10, I am not joking. Omori is not defeated, but accepted, and you win. Playing through the game, both Sunny and Omori have this blank ass stare I mentioned at the beginning. This does not change apart from a few fights, and Sunny doesn't even have a smiling sprite. He is completely silent throughout the game and completely expressionless. It's very clear he'd much rather feel nothing and not confront his trauma. But now that he has, something very interesting happens. He cries. He speaks. He finally smiles. It feels oh so fucking earned. Had Sunny just done this from the beginning, it would have lost all impact. But this is how you fucking write a story. Omori is a game that delivers and does not disappoint. At the end of the game, you feel like Sunny has actually accomplished something meaningful by telling the truth to his friends. The hospital scene is the most memorable part of the game for me, and I will never forget when I played this game for the first time. Omori is not a friendship as magic story, or about depression, nor is it a game about Sunny forgiving himself and not giving fuck at all about what his friends think, contrary to absurdly popular belief. Rather, it is a game about reconciliation, believing in oneself, and above all else, trust. And sometimes, all someone might need is a little push from a friend. The game ends with Sunny moving away, and it is perfect. My internet was off when I first played the game, so I wasn't sure if it was the good ending or not, but I thought it was so beautiful that the game couldn't have ended any other way. I will die on the hill, proclaiming this game as one of the best of all time, and nothing can convince me otherwise. But before I close this off, I should take time to mention this game's other endings, because it isn't always so happy. If you give up against Omori, Sunny will succumb to his own guilt and plunge himself off the hospital rooftop. While this ending is a fan favorite, I am not the biggest fan of it. I'm supposed to take Sunny's death seriously when My Time is such a fast and bombastic song. I much prefer the quote-unquote neutral endings for this. Most noteworthy one being is should you refuse to save Basil at the end of the game. Your friends are crying and in shock, and you get to see Basil for yourself, as well as Sunny blocking it out. During this game's development, the scene was supposed to play with a sound that would loop until you went to bed. However, in the version that we got, Basil's death is completely silent. The silence speaks far louder than any creepy sound can, and if you aren't convinced about how intentionally well crafted Omori is, I don't know what else will. When you walk home from Basil's house, you know you have lost the game. So if you choose to end Sunny's life the following day, it doesn't come across as much of a surprise. If you refuse to open the door to Kel, you enter the Omori route. Here you never leave your house, and a lot of exclusive content opens as a result of this. However, you've accepted your inner demons and will never move on. One thing this does well is showing how unbelievably lonely Sunny is. His house is eerily quiet and the visuals go a long way. He doesn't even see himself as Sunny anymore. You will never learn the truth, and Sunny's happy memories are permanently blacked out. And eventually, you get the option to end your life at any moment. I do very briefly want to mention Black Space 2, my favorite part of the game, and limited to this route. The amount of secrets, areas, and hidden entrances is absolutely fucking ridiculous. No game here beats Omori with the amount of hidden content it has. This actually astonishes me. This is by far the creepiest yet also most depressing part of the game, and it's something no other game here replicates. This is how you incorporate horror into a game, and it is fucking amazing. Really, I'm just scratching the surface here. There's so much to talk about and experience here. I tried to give the best explanation I could as to why I like the story so much, but none of that will replace experiencing it for yourself and see all the care and attention that went into it. Omori took 6.5 years to make, and it really shows. I give 0 fucks if this game has spoiled you. Play this game right now. It is damn near perfect and has rekindled some of my friendships alone. I have teared up on many games before, but this is the only game that I have actually cried to. I have absolutely no complaints regarding this game's story. It is a fucking masterpiece. And that's all. I could go on, but you get the point. I greatly respect the stories of Mother Free, Lisa, and Undertale, but Omori is in a league of its own. And even then, its gameplay, artwork, and especially music are extremely capable and get the job well done. Omori is number 1 on this list, and there is not a single game here that can even remotely challenge its position on its throne. Thanks for watching.
Okay, I just saw this in chat. Who the fuck called this femboy Undertale?